I hired a guy to mow the lawn while my daughter was away in Europe. About an hour later, he called me and whispered, "Sir, is anyone else in the house right now?" I asked him, "What do you mean?" He said, "I hear crying coming from your basement." "That is not a TV, sir. I hear scratching on the ventilation dig." That was the moment my blood ran cold. I am Marcus Thorne, 72 years old, and I spent 40 years as a city building inspector. I know every inch of that house because I built it with my own hands to keep my family safe. But I never imagined the danger would come from the person sleeping in the master bedroom. Before I tell you what I found when I broke down that door, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments where you are listening from. Your support helps me expose the truth. The humidity in Florida was suffocating. I was sitting on the balcony of a rental condo in Boca Raton, staring at a golf course that looked too green to be real. I hated it. I have never been a man who enjoys sitting still. My hands are rough from decades of handling brick and mortar not designed for holding cocktail glasses with little umbrellas in them. But my son-in-law, Julian, had insisted. He bought the tickets. He booked the place. He told me with that slick smile of his that I looked tired. He said, "Marcus, you have worked hard your whole life. Go down south. Soak up the sun. Let Layla and me handle things here for a few weeks. We are going to Paris anyway, so the house will be empty. You deserve a break." It sounded nice. It sounded like something a caring son-in-law would say. But looking back now, I realize it was not a gift. It was an eviction. My phone buzzed on the glass table. It was Dante. Dante is 22 years old, a good kid from the neighborhood who started his own landscaping business. I trust Dante. He is the kind of young man who looks you in the eye when he shakes your hand. He doesn't have the soft hands of a stockbroker like Julian. I picked up expecting him to ask about the fertilizer schedule or maybe tell me a sprinkler head was broken. "Mr. Thorne," his voice was wrong. It was too quiet. It was breathless. "Hey, Dante, everything all right with the mower?" "No, sir. Turn off the mower. I am standing by the side of the house, near the window wells for the basement." I sat up straighter in my chair. The ice in my drink clinked. "Why are you whispering, son? You told me the house was empty, right? You said Layla and Julian went to Paris yesterday." "That is right. They flew out of JFK last night." "Why?" "Mr. Thorne, there is someone in the basement." I felt a tightening in my chest. My doctor tells me to watch my blood pressure, but in that moment I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Is it a burglar, Dante? Call the police if you see a break-in." "No, sir, it is not like that. The alarm isn't going off. The windows are intact." But I was trimming the hedges near the foundation, and I heard it. It is a low sound, like whimpering, and then scratching, like fingernails on metal. It is coming right through the vent. I stood up. The Florida sun suddenly felt cold on my skin. "Dante, I need you to listen to me carefully. Are you sure it is not the television? Maybe they left it on a timer to scare off thieves." "I know the sound of a TV, Mr. Thorne. This is a person. It sounds like a woman. She is crying." My hand started to shake. Just a little. I clenched my fist to stop it. Layla. My sweet Layla. She was supposed to be in front of the Eiffel Tower right now. She had sent me a text photo of her boarding pass yesterday. Or at least I thought she did. "Hang on, Dante. Stay on the line. Do not hang up." I put him on speaker and opened the security app on my phone. I installed that system myself 3 years ago. Hardwired, not wireless. I don't trust the cloud. I trust copper wires. I tapped the icon for the basement camera. Connection failed. I tapped the living room camera. Connection failed. I tapped the perimeter cameras. System offline. A cold dread settled in my stomach. That system runs on a backup generator. It doesn't just go offline. Someone has to physically go into the utility closet and pull the breaker and cut the hard line. Someone who knows exactly where the box is. "Dante," I said, my voice dropping to a growl. "Get out of there. Go to your truck. Wait for me to call you back. Do not go inside that house. Do you understand me?" "Sir, should I call 911? "No." The word came out of me sharper than I intended. I took a breath. If Julian was in there, if he had done something to Layla, and if the police showed up with sirens blaring and lights flashing, he might panic. I have seen it happen. I spent 40 years working with the city. I know how domestic situations escalate. If there is a hostage situation, you do not announce yourself until you know the layout. And nobody knows the layout of that house better than me. No police, Dante, not yet. If you call them and it turns out to be nothing, we look like fools. But if it is something bad, I need to be there. Just watch the driveway. If you see Julian's car or any movement, text me." I hung up. I dialed Layla. It went straight to voicemail. "Hi, you have reached Layla. I am currently away in Europe with my amazing husband. Leave a message." Her voice sounded cheerful, but hearing it now, it sounded scripted. Too happy, too perfect. I dialed Julian. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. I did not leave a message. I went into the bedroom and threw my clothes into my suitcase. I did not fold them. I just jammed them in. My mind was racing, connecting dots I had been too blind to see before. Julian had been so eager for me to leave. He had been pushing this trip for months. "Come on, Marcus, you are always hovering," he would say. "Give us some space." I thought I was just being an annoying old father-in-law. I thought I was being overprotective. Since my wife Beatrice passed away, Layla is all I have. She is the only bright spot in a world that seems to be getting darker and colder every year. When she married Julian, I tried to be happy. He was handsome. He was successful. He wore Italian suits and drove a German car. But there was always something about his eyes. They were cold, calculating, like a shark looking at a seal. But Layla loved him, or she thought she did, so I stepped back. I let them live in the big house I built. I moved into the in-law suite above the garage, and then eventually I just stayed out of their way. I grabbed my wallet and keys. I drove to the Miami airport, driving 20 miles over the limit. I didn't care about tickets. I didn't care about anything except the sound Dante described. Scratching. On the plane, I couldn't sit still. The flight attendant asked me if I was all right. I told her I was fine, but I wasn't. I was replaying the last few months in my head. Layla had been losing weight. She stopped coming to Sunday dinners. She said she was busy with yoga or charity work. But when I did see her, she wore long sleeves, even in summer. She wore heavy makeup. "Oh, Daddy, I am just clumsy," she would say when I asked about a bruise on her arm. I bumped into the doorframe. I chose to believe her, because the alternative was too painful to accept. The alternative meant that while I was out inspecting foundations for other people, my own foundation was rotting away. I am a man of logic. I deal in load-bearing walls and tensile strength. If a beam is weak, you reinforce it. If a pipe is leaking, you replace it. But people are not houses. You cannot just open them up and fix the broken parts. But Julian I could fix. If he touched her. If he laid a hand on my little girl. I looked at my hands resting on the tray table. They were wrinkled now, spotted with age, but they were still strong. I could still swing a sledgehammer. I could still break things. The flight landed at 11 p.m. I didn't wait for luggage. I had my carry-on. I rented a car because I didn't want a record of a taxi dropping me off. I wanted to arrive quietly. The drive to my neighborhood usually takes 40 minutes. I made it in 25. When I turned onto our street, my heart sank. The house was dark, not just sleeping dark. It was dead dark. The porch lights were off. The landscape lights were off. It looked like a black hole in the middle of the manicured suburban street. I parked 3 houses down. I didn't want Julian to see headlights. I walked the rest of the way, keeping to the shadows. My knees ached. The damp night air of New York was biting after the Florida heat. I saw Dante's truck parked down the block. I texted him, "Go home, son. You did good. I will handle it from here." He texted back immediately, "I am not leaving, Mr. Thorne. I have a tire iron under my seat. If you need me, flash your light twice." Good kid. I walked up the driveway. The house loomed over me. I built this place in 1990. I poured the concrete for the driveway myself. I framed the walls. I knew that the third step on the porch creaked if you stepped in the middle, so I stepped to the side. I reached the front door. I pulled out my key ring. I still had the master key. I slid it into the lock. It didn't turn. I frowned and tried again, jiggling it. Nothing. I took out my phone and shined the light on the lock. It was brand new, a high-security deadbolt, shiny, expensive, and definitely not the one I installed. He changed the locks. He sent me to Florida, and the moment my plane took off, he changed the locks on my own house. Rage is a funny thing. Sometimes it is hot like fire. But for me right then, it was cold. It was ice cold. It sharpened my senses. I could smell the mulch in the garden. I could hear the distant hum of the highway. I didn't knock. Knocking would give him time to prepare. I walked around to the side of the house near the garage. There's a utility box there that houses the main electrical breakers. Most people lock it with a cheap padlock. I used a combination lock. I spun the dial. Click. I opened the box. Inside, taped to the back of the panel, was a magnetic key holder. It was my fail-safe, my backup plan for emergencies. I prayed he hadn't found it. My fingers brushed against the cold metal of the box. Empty. No, wait. I felt higher up. There it was. I grabbed the key. It was the original construction key. It would open the side door to the mudroom. That door had an older lock one I figured Julian might have been too lazy to replace because it was hidden behind the trellis. I pushed through the rose bushes, ignoring the thorns tearing at my jacket. I reached the side door. I inserted the key. It turned. I exhaled a breath I didn't know I was holding. I turned the handle and stepped into the mudroom. The smell hit me first. It wasn't the smell of home. It didn't smell like the lavender potpourri Beatrice used to keep in the hallway. It smelled like chemicals, bleach, ammonia, strong industrial cleaner. It burned my nose. Why would the house smell like a hospital if nobody was home? I moved silently into the kitchen. The moonlight filtered through the blinds, casting long striped shadows across the floor. The house was too quiet. It wasn't the silence of an empty house. It was the silence of a house that was holding its breath. I crept toward the hallway that led to the basement door. That was when I saw him. Julian was standing in the living room. He was wearing a bathrobe and he was holding a baseball bat. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking out the front window, peering through the blinds, waiting for something, or someone. He looked unkempt. His hair was messy. He hadn't shaved. This wasn't the polished stockbroker I knew. This was a man on the edge. I stepped on a floorboard. It groaned. Julian spun around so fast he almost tripped. He raised the bat, his eyes wide with terror. "Who is there?" I stepped out of the shadows. "It is me, Julian. Put the bat down." He froze. For a second, I saw pure panic in his face. He looked like a kid who got caught with his hand in the cookie jar, only the jar was my house and the cookies were something much darker. Then the mask slipped back on. He lowered the bat and forced a smile. It was a terrible fake smile. "Marcus." "Dad, you scared me to death. What are you doing here? You are supposed to be in Florida." I didn't smile back. "I came home early. I missed my bed. Where is Layla?" He didn't blink. The lie came out smooth like oil. "She is upstairs asleep. She came down with a terrible flu right before we were supposed to leave. We had to cancel the trip. I didn't want to worry you, so we didn't call." I stared at him. I knew he was lying. I could feel it in my gut. "Is that so? Well, I will just go up and say hello. I won't wake her." I took a step toward the stairs. Julian moved. He was fast. He stepped in front of me, blocking the path. "No, you can't. The doctor said it is highly contagious. She needs absolute rest. Really, Marcus, you should go back to your hotel. You don't want to get sick at your age." At my age. He always used that. Like I was a fragile piece of antique furniture. I looked him in the eye. "I am not going to a hotel, Julian. This is my house, and I want to see my daughter." I tried to step around him, but he grabbed my arm. His grip was tight. Too tight. I said, "No, Marcus." We stood there for a moment, a standoff in the dark living room. I could smell alcohol on his breath. Whiskey. Cheap whiskey. "Fine," I said, pulling my arm away. "If she is sick, let her sleep. I will go check the basement then. I need to get my tools." The color drained from his face. It happened instantly. He went pale even in the dim light. "The basement? Why? Why would you go down there? I just told you. My tools." "You can't go down there," he stammered. "A pipe burst. Yesterday. It is flooded. 3 feet of water. It is a disaster area. I have a crew coming to pump it out tomorrow." "It is dangerous, Marcus. Electric shock hazard. A burst pipe. Flooding. Contagious flu. Broken cameras." The lies were piling up like bricks in a wall. I looked at the basement door. It was closed. But at the bottom where the door met the floor, I saw something. New sawdust. Yellow fresh pine sawdust. Someone had been drilling. Recently. I looked back at Julian. "Okay," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Okay. I believe you." He let out a breath and his shoulders relaxed. "Good. Good. Look, why don't you sleep on the couch tonight? We can sort this all out in the morning." I nodded. "Sure. I am tired anyway." He watched me like a hawk as I took off my jacket and sat on the sofa. He didn't move until I laid down and closed my eyes. "Good night, Marcus," he said. He went upstairs, but I knew he wasn't going to sleep. I heard him stop on the landing, listening. I lay there in the dark, counting the seconds. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he could hear it. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. I heard a door close upstairs. I opened my eyes. I didn't sleep. I waited. 20 minutes later, when the house was completely silent, I sat up. I took off my shoes. I moved across the hardwood floor in my socks. I didn't go to the basement door. Not yet. I went to the floor vent near the window, the same vent Dante had been standing near outside. I knelt down. I put my ear to the metal grate. At first I heard nothing, just the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Then I heard it. It was faint, muffled, but undeniable. It wasn't water rushing from a burst pipe. It was a voice. Please. A woman's voice. Weak, broken. Please let me out. It was Layla. And then the scratching started. Scritch, scritch, scritch. I closed my eyes and a single tear rolled down my cheek. My daughter was directly beneath me, trapped in the house I built to protect her. I stood up. I looked at the basement door. I looked at the heavy-duty locks Julian had installed. He didn't know who he was dealing with. He thought he was trapping a helpless woman. He didn't know he had just locked himself in a cage with a wolf. I wasn't going to call the police. Not yet. I was going to dismantle his life piece by piece, just like I inspect a condemned building before I bring it down. I turned and walked silently toward the kitchen. I needed a knife. And I needed to make a plan. Because tomorrow morning Julian wasn't going to have a father-in-law anymore. He was going to have a nightmare. Here is the detailed script for Part 2, written in English, optimized for voiceover reading with the requested tone and style. The key did not turn. I stood on the porch of the house I had built with my own 2 hands 30 years ago, and I was locked out. I looked closely at the deadbolt under the pale yellow light of the street lamp. It was brand new. A shiny, expensive smart lock with a keypad and a fingerprint scanner. It was the kind of technology Julian loved. Flashy, expensive, and completely soulless. He had replaced my solid brass deadbolt, the one I had installed to withstand a battering ram, with this electronic toy. I felt a surge of heat rise up the back of my neck. It was not just anger, it was a violation. I had poured the foundation of this house in 1990. I had framed the walls. I had sanded the oak floors until my knees bled. And now this man, this stranger I had welcomed into my family, had changed the locks the moment my plane left the tarmac. I did not knock. Knocking gives the enemy time to prepare, time to hide the evidence, or time to load a weapon. And I knew deep in my gut that this was no longer a family visit. This was a reconnaissance mission. I walked off the porch and into the shadows of the side yard. The hydrangeas Beatrice had planted were overgrown. Julian had stopped paying the gardener weeks ago, which was why Dante had been here today. I moved toward the electrical service panel mounted on the brick wall near the garage. Most people think these boxes are just for breakers, but when you spend 40 years as a building inspector, you learn a few tricks. You learn that every house has a weakness, and every builder leaves themselves a way in. I pulled a small flathead screwdriver from my keychain and undid the screw on the bottom of the gray metal box. Inside, tucked behind the main circuit breaker, was a small magnetic hide, a key box. I held my breath as I reached in. If Julian had found this, I was in trouble. My fingers brushed against cold metal. I let out a long, shaky exhale. It was still there, the master key. The skeleton key that opened the side door to the mudroom, the one door Julian had likely forgotten to upgrade because it was hidden behind the trellis. I walked through the wet grass to the side door. My hand trembled slightly as I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a heavy, satisfying click. I pushed the door open and stepped into the darkness. The smell hit me first. For 20 years, this house had smelled like lavender and old paper. It was the scent of Beatrice. Even years after she passed away, the house held on to her memory in the curtains and the carpets. But that smell was gone. In its place was something sharp and chemical. Bleach. Strong industrial-grade bleach mixed with the sickening sweetness of heavy air freshener. It smelled like a hospital hallway. It smelled like someone was trying very hard to scrub something away. I closed the door silently behind me. The house was dead quiet. No hum of the refrigerator. No ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Just a heavy, suffocating silence. I moved through the kitchen, my footsteps silent on the linoleum. I knew every squeaky floorboard in this house because I was the one who nailed them down. I stepped over the third board near the island, knowing it would groan if I put my weight on it. I made my way to the living room archway. That was when the lights blinded me. A high-intensity tactical flashlight beam hit me square in the face. I threw my hand up to shield my eyes. "Don't move, or I will crack your skull open." The voice was high-pitched, tight with panic. I heard the unmistakable swoosh of a baseball bat cutting through the air as it was raised. Julian put the bat down. I kept my voice low and steady. The voice I used when I had to tell a contractor his building was unsafe and had to be torn down. "Dad." The light wavered. The beam dropped to the floor. I blinked, trying to clear the spots from my vision. Julian stood there in his silk bathrobe, clutching a wooden baseball bat like a lifeline. He looked terrible. His hair was standing up in greasy tufts. His eyes were wide and bloodshot with dark purple bags under them. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. He lowered the bat, but he didn't put it down. He stared at me as if he were seeing a ghost. "You are supposed to be in Florida," he whispered. His voice cracked. "Why are you here, Marcus?" I took a step forward. He took a step back, gripping the bat tighter. "I decided to come home early," I said, watching his eyes. "I missed my bed. And Dante called me. He said he heard noises." Julian flinched. It was small, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. The muscles in his jaw tightened. Noises he repeated, forcing a laugh that sounded more like a cough. "That kid is crazy." I fired him. "He was probably trying to scare you to get his job back." "There are no noises here, Marcus. Just me. Where is Layla?" I asked the question flatly. I didn't want explanations. I wanted a location. Julian rubbed his face with his free hand. He took a deep breath, and when he looked up, the panic was gone, replaced by that slick used car salesman charm that I had always hated. "She is sleeping, Dad. Look, I didn't want to worry you while you were on vacation. That is why we didn't call. Layla has the flu, a really bad strain. The doctor was here yesterday. He said it is highly contagious. She has a fever of 103. I stared at him. I looked at his hands. They were shaking. "She is sick," I said. "So you canceled the trip to Paris?" "Exactly," Julian said, nodding too quickly. "We couldn't fly. She is devastated, Marcus. She has been sleeping for 20 hours straight. We have been quarantined here. That is why I changed the locks. We had a break-in scare down the street last week, and with Layla sick, I just wanted to be safe." Lies. I could build a skyscraper with the amount of lies coming out of his mouth. "I want to see her," I said, moving toward the stairs. Julian stepped in front of me. He didn't raise the bat, but he blocked my path. He was younger than me by 40 years, taller and broader, but he was soft. "You can't," he said. The doctor was very specific. "No visitors, not even family. It is too dangerous for someone of your age. If you catch this, it could kill you, Marcus." I looked up the stairs. The door to the master bedroom was closed. "I don't care about the flu, Julian. Get out of my way." I pushed past him. He grabbed my arm. His grip was desperate. "Dad, please, let her sleep. If you wake her up, she will just start vomiting again. It has been a nightmare. Just let her rest tonight. You can see her in the morning when the fever breaks. Please, for her sake." I stopped. I looked at the closed door upstairs, then back at the hallway leading to the kitchen. And the basement. If Dante was right, Layla wasn't upstairs. The crying had come from the vent. "Fine," I said, pulling my arm away from his clammy grip. "I won't disturb her. But I am not going to a hotel. I will sleep in the guest room." Julian let out a breath that sounded like a tire losing air. Okay, that works." I turned around and started walking toward the kitchen. "Where are you going now?" he asked, his voice spiking with anxiety again. "I am thirsty," I said, "and I need to check the furnace. The house feels cold." "No." He shouted the word. He actually jumped in front of the hallway entrance, spreading his arms out. "You can't go down there, Marcus." I stopped inches from his face. I could smell the stale whiskey on his breath beneath the mint toothpaste. "Why can't I go into my own basement, Julian?" "Because of the leak," he stammered. "The main pipe burst yesterday. That is the noise Dante probably heard. Rushing water. The whole basement is flooded, Marcus. There is 3 feet of standing water down there, and there are live wires hanging from the ceiling. It is a death trap. I have a crew coming to pump it out tomorrow morning." I looked down at his slippers. They were dry. "If the basement is flooded 3 feet deep," I said slowly, "why didn't you shut off the main water valve outside?" "I did," he said quickly. "I did shut it off. But the water is still there. You can't go down. It is a hazard." I looked at the basement door behind him. It was painted white just like the walls. But there was something new. A heavy silver padlock hasp had been screwed into the frame and the door. A padlock the size of my fist hung from it. "You put a padlock on a flooded basement?" I asked, pointing at it. Julian looked back at the door, then at me. His eyes were darting around, looking for an exit, looking for a lie that would stick. To keep the cats out, he said. So they don't drown. We don't have cats, Julian. I stared at him. The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. He knew that I knew. But he also knew that he was 35 and holding a baseball bat, and I was 72 and holding nothing but a keychain. Right, he said, swallowing hard. I meant to keep anyone from falling in. Look, Marcus, you are tired. You are imagining things. Just go to bed, please. I looked at the padlock again. It was a Master Lock Magnum, boron carbide shackle, bolt cutter resistant. You don't buy a lock like that to keep a cat out. You buy a lock like that to keep a human being in. I made a choice in that moment. If I forced my way past him now, things would get violent. And if Layla was trapped down there, I didn't know what he would do to her if he felt cornered. I needed to be smarter. I needed to be the inspector who finds the crack in the foundation before the building collapses. Okay, I said, forcing my shoulders to slump. Okay, Julian, you win. I am too old for this tonight. I will sleep in the guest room. We will deal with the water in the morning. Julian slumped against the wall, looking like he might faint with relief. Thank you, Dad. Thank you for being reasonable. I turned and walked toward the stairs. I climbed them slowly, letting him hear my heavy footsteps. I went into the guest room and closed the door loud enough for him to hear, but I didn't get into bed. I sat on the floor with my back against the door and I listened. I listened as Julian paced the hallway downstairs. I listened as he dragged a heavy chair in front of the basement door. And then faintly through the floorboards I heard it again. It wasn't water. It was a sob. And it was coming from beneath the 3 feet of concrete I had poured to keep my family safe. I looked at the clock on the nightstand. It was 3 a.m. I took out my phone and texted Dante. Are you still there? The reply came 3 seconds later. I never left. I stood up. I didn't need sleep. I needed a crowbar. The guest room bed felt like a slab of concrete beneath my back. I lay there staring at the ceiling fan, which was just a shadow against the darkness of the plaster. My body was exhausted. The flight from Florida, the drive from the airport, and the confrontation with Julian had drained me physically. My joints ached with that deep, dull throb that comes when a storm is rolling in or when stress tightens every muscle fiber you have. But my mind was wide awake. It was racing like a high-speed drill. I looked at the digital clock on the nightstand. The red numbers changed from 2:59 to 3 o'clock. The house was silent now. I had heard Julian go into the master bedroom down the hall about an hour ago. I heard the heavy thud of the door closing and the click of the lock. He locked himself in. That was interesting. A man who claims his wife has a contagious flu doesn't usually lock the door from the inside unless he is afraid of something getting in, or maybe he was afraid of me. He should be. I sat up and swung my legs over the side of the bed. I did not turn on the lamp. I knew this room. I knew the distance from the bed to the door was exactly 6 paces. I knew the floorboards under the rug were secure because I had reinforced the subfloor myself in '95. I stood up and waited for my eyes to adjust. The rage I had felt earlier had cooled down into something harder, something sharper. It was a cold calculation now. I needed evidence. Julian had blocked me with lies about the flu and flooded basements, but lies always leave cracks. And as an inspector, my job was to find those cracks and pry them open until the whole structure came down. I opened the guest room door. It made a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. I froze, holding my breath. I waited. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. No movement from the master bedroom. No sound from downstairs. I slipped into the hallway. I was wearing my thick wool socks. I moved toward the stairs, keeping my weight near the wall where the joists were strongest and the floor was less likely to squeak. The smell of bleach was still there, faint but distinct, drifting up from the first floor. It mixed with the smell of old dust. It was the smell of a crime scene cleaned up in a hurry. I reached the bottom of the stairs and turned toward the kitchen. The moonlight coming through the bay window was brighter now, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I avoided the loose board near the kitchen island, the one I had stepped on earlier. I moved like a ghost in the house I had built. I stopped at the entrance to the small hallway that led to the basement door. This was it. The point of no return. I took out my phone and covered the flashlight with my finger, leaving only a sliver of light to escape. I didn't want to beam a spotlight around the room. I just needed to see the floor. I crept forward. The basement door loomed ahead. Earlier, Julian had stood in front of it, blocking my view. Now I could see it clearly, my breath hitched in my throat. It wasn't just one padlock. There were three, one near the top, one in the middle where the doorknob used to be, and one near the bottom. These were not hardware store locks. I shined my light closer. They were heavy-duty abuse granite padlocks, the kind used for shipping containers or construction site tool chests. They were bolted into the frame with heavy steel hasps. The screws were long, probably 3-inch deck screws driven deep into the stud. I felt a wave of nausea. You don't install security like this to keep water out. You don't install it to keep a cat out. This was a cell door. He had turned my basement into a vault. I knelt down. My knees cracked, but I ignored the pain. I wanted to look at the floor right in front of the door. The oak planks I had laid down 30 years ago were honey-colored and smooth, protected by 3 coats of high-grade polyurethane varnish. I was proud of these floors. I moved the sliver of light across the wood, and there they were, scratches, deep gouges in the wood. They started about 4 feet away from the door and led right up to the threshold. I ran my finger over them. They were jagged, rough. These weren't marks from moving furniture. Furniture leaves long, straight lines. These marks were erratic, chaotic. They were the marks of something being dragged, something heavy that was fighting back. I saw a splinter of wood sticking up. Caught in the splinter was a tiny shred of fabric. It was blue, pale blue silk. My heart stopped. Layla had a robe that color. I had given it to her for Christmas last year. He dragged her. The realization hit me so hard I almost fell over. He didn't just lock her down there. He had to force her. She had fought him right here in this hallway while the rest of the neighborhood slept. She had dug her heels in. She had clawed at the floor. I felt a tear, hot and angry, slide down my nose. My little girl, my strong, independent Layla, reduced to scratch marks on a floor. I leaned forward and pressed my ear against the cold painted wood of the door. At first there was only the humming silence of the house. Then I heard it again. It was clearer this time. It wasn't just a sob, it was a rhythm, a rocking sound, and then a voice, so weak it sounded like a ghost. Daddy. It was barely a whisper, but it was her. It was Layla. Daddy, please. It's cold. I clamped my hand over my mouth to stop the sob that was clawing its way up my throat. She knew I was here, or maybe she was hallucinating. Maybe she was calling out to the memory of me. I am here, baby, I whispered against the wood. I am right here. Help me. Please. He took my phone. The voice broke into a jagged cough. I grabbed the middle padlock. I pulled on it with all my strength. It held firm. The steel didn't even budge. I pulled again, rattling the heavy metal against the hasp. Clang, clang, clang. I didn't care about the noise anymore. I didn't care about stealth. My daughter was 5 inches away from me, separated by a piece of wood and 3 blocks of hardened steel. I looked around frantically. I needed a tool, a crowbar, a hammer, anything. The kitchen, the knife block, the meat cleaver. It wouldn't cut the lock, but I could hack through the wood of the door frame. I could chop through the drywall if I had to. I started to push myself up, my muscles tense, to sprint to the kitchen. Then a shadow fell over me. It was long and dark, stretching across the scratched floorboards. I froze. I slowly turned my head. Julian was standing there. He hadn't made a sound. He was barefoot. He was wearing black sweatpants and a black t-shirt now. He looked huge in this dim light, his face obscured by the shadows. He wasn't holding the baseball bat this time. He was holding a glass of water. He took a sip casually, as if he were just getting a midnight drink. You are losing it, Marcus, he said. His voice was calm. Too calm. It was the voice you use when talking to a confused child or a dangerous dog. I stood up slowly, facing him. My hands were balled into fists at my sides. Open this door, Julian. He sighed a long, exaggerated sigh of disappointment. He shook his head. We talked about this, Dad. You are tired. You are hearing things. It is the stress of the travel. It plays tricks on the mind, especially at your age. I pointed at the door. My finger was shaking. I heard her. She called my name. She said you took her phone. Open the damn door or I will break it down with my bare hands. Julian chuckled. It was a dry, humorless sound. That wasn't Layla Marcus. That is the sump pump. The intake valve is clogged because of the flood. It makes a wheezing sound, like a moan. And the pipes rattle. It sounds like talking if you listen hard enough. It is called pareidolia, the brain finding patterns where there are none. You of all people should know that." "Do not lie to me," I growled, stepping closer to him. "I saw the scratches on the floor, Julian. I saw the gouges. You dragged her down there." He didn't flinch. He just looked at the floor and shrugged. "Those scratches," he said, taking another sip of water. "Those are from the contractor. When he brought the heavy dehumidifiers in yesterday, he was careless. He dragged them across the floor." I was furious. I told him he ruined your beautiful varnish. I was going to sand them out tomorrow before you saw them. I didn't want you to get upset. He was smooth. Every accusation I threw at him he caught and spun into a perfectly reasonable explanation. The locks were for safety. The noise was the pump. The scratches were the workmen. But his eyes gave him away. They were dead, cold and flat like a shark's eyes. He was enjoying this. He was enjoying watching me squirm. "Give me the key," I said. "If it is just a pump and dehumidifiers, then show me. Prove me wrong, Julian. Make me look like a senile old fool. I will apologize. I will leave. Just open the door." He stared at me for a long moment. He took a step closer, invading my personal space. He smelled of mint and sweat. "I can't do that, Marcus, because if I open that door, the water will rush out and ruin the hallway floors too. And then you would really be mad." He leaned in close to my ear. His whisper was like ice water in my ear. "Go to bed, old man, before you have an accident. The stairs can be very slippery in the dark." He pulled back and smiled that plastic smile again. "Good night, Marcus. Sleep tight." He turned and walked back toward the stairs, sipping his water. I stood there trembling. Not with fear, but with a violent primal instinct to wrap my hands around his throat and squeeze until the truth popped out. But I knew I couldn't. He was 35, I was 72. If I attacked him, he would claim self-defense. He would say I had a dementia episode. He would have me committed, and then Layla would truly be alone. I looked back at the basement door. Hold on, baby, I thought. Just hold on. I needed help. I needed backup. And I needed to be smarter than him. I went back to the guest room and closed the door. But I didn't go to bed. I grabbed my phone. I sat in the closet under a pile of blankets to muffle the sound, and I dialed Dante. "Pick up, kid," I whispered. "Pick up." He answered on the first ring. "Mr. Thorne, Dante, listen to me. I need you to go to my workshop in the city. You know where I keep the spare key." "Yes, sir. I need you to get the endoscopic camera, the one I use to inspect inside walls for mold, and bring the heavy bolt cutters, the red ones. You are going to break in." "No," I said. "I am going to see what is on the other side of that door without opening it. Meet me at the back fence in an hour." I hung up. Julian thought he had won the night. He thought his locks and his lies were enough to stop me. But he forgot one thing. I built this house. I know where the air ducts run. I know where the weak points are. And I was coming for my daughter. The sun came up over the suburbs of Long Island like a mockery. It was bright and cheerful, the kind of morning where you hear lawnmowers starting up and birds singing. But inside the house I built, the air was heavy and stagnant. It felt like a tomb. I hadn't slept. I had spent the hours between 3 and 6 in the morning sitting in the guest room closet texting Dante and formulating a plan. I needed to see Layla. I needed to see her with my own eyes before I made my next move. I walked down to the kitchen at 7 sharp. I expected silence. I expected a house in lockdown. Instead, I smelled bacon. Julian was standing at the stove. He was wearing a clean white shirt and gray slacks, looking like he was ready to head into Wall Street. He turned when I entered and smiled. It wasn't the manic smile from last night. It was a sad, tired smile. The smile of a martyr. "Good morning, Marcus. There is coffee in the pot. I made eggs." I looked at the plate he pushed across the granite island. Scrambled eggs, toast. It looked normal. It looked domestic. It made my skin crawl. "I don't want eggs, Julian." I stood on the other side of the island, gripping the edge of the granite until my knuckles turned white. "I want to see my daughter. Now." Julian sighed and turned off the burner. He wiped his hands on a towel with slow, deliberate movements. He looked at me with eyes that seemed filled with pity. "I know you do, Dad. I know. I was just coming up to get you. She is awake." He walked around the island. He didn't look like a man who had been holding a baseball bat a few hours ago. He looked like a grieving husband. "Please, just be gentle with her," he said quietly. "She is very fragile right now. What happened? It broke her, Marcus. It broke both of us." I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't care about his script. I just nodded. and followed him to the stairs. The walk up to the second floor felt like walking underwater. My legs felt heavy. The smell of bleach was fainter up here, replaced by the smell of sickness. It was that smell of sweat and fever and stale air that hangs in a room where someone hasn't moved for days. We reached the master bedroom door. It was closed. Julian put his hand on the knob. He hesitated. "She might not recognize you at first," he whispered. "The medication is strong, but she needs it to stop the screaming." He opened the door. The room was dark. The blackout curtains were drawn tight, choking out the morning sun. The only light came from a small lamp on the nightstand, casting long orange shadows across the bed. And there she was, my Layla. She was lying on her back, staring at the ceiling fan. She looked so small. When I built this house, I remembered her running through these halls as a teenager, full of fire and life. Now she looked like a ghost. Her skin was gray, her hair was matted to her forehead with sweat. Layla. The name escaped my lips like a prayer. I rushed to the side of the bed. I fell to my knees. "Baby girl, it's Daddy. I am here." She didn't blink. Her eyes were glassy, dilated pupils, swallowing the brown irises I loved so much. She was breathing shallow, rapid breaths. She doesn't see me," I said, turning to Julian. "What did you give her?" "Just what the doctor prescribed," Julian said, standing by the door, keeping his distance. "Sedatives, antipsychotics. I stood up. "Why would you give her that?" "She has the flu, Julian. You said she has the flu." Julian looked down at his shoes. He let out a long, shuddering breath. "That was a lie, Marcus. I am sorry. I lied to you because the truth is shameful, or at least Layla thinks it is." He looked up at me and a single perfect tear rolled down his cheek. "She didn't have the flu. She was pregnant, Marcus. We were going to surprise you when we got back from Paris. It was going to be your grandchild." I froze. Pregnant. But she lost it. Julian continued, his voice breaking. "A week ago, a miscarriage. It was violent. There was so much blood. We rushed to the hospital, but there was nothing they could do." He walked over to the other side of the bed and sat down, stroking Layla's hair. "It triggered something in her brain, Dad. A psychotic break. The doctor said it is rare, but it happens. Post-traumatic psychosis. She started screaming. She started attacking me. She thinks the baby is still inside her. She tries to cut herself open to get it out." I stared at him. The story was perfect. It explained everything. It explained the crying I heard. It explained the scratches on the floor downstairs. She was trying to escape her grief. It explained the locks. He was trying to keep her from hurting herself. "That is why I locked the basement," Julian said softly. "Last night, she got out. She ran down there. She was clawing at the furnace, trying to find a place to hide. I had to drag her back up. I had to restrain her. That is the scratching you heard. Not a prisoner, just a broken mother." He looked at me with those pleading eyes. "I am protecting her, Marcus. I am doing everything I can. I didn't want you to see her like this. I wanted you to remember her happy." For a second, I wavered. I looked at Layla. Her face was twisted in pain, even in her sleep. Losing a child, that kind of pain can destroy a person. I remembered when Beatrice died how Layla had stopped speaking for a month. Was it possible? Was I the villain here? Was I an angry old man attacking a grieving husband who was just trying to keep his wife alive? I sat down on the edge of the bed. I reached out and took Layla's hand. It was burning hot. Her fever was real. "I am so sorry, baby," I whispered. I didn't know. I rubbed her hand with my thumb just like I used to do when she was a little girl and had a nightmare. Her hand felt rough. I looked down at her fingers. Layla was a pianist. She took pride in her hands. She always kept her nails perfect, filed into soft ovals, usually painted a pale pink. But these nails were ruined. They were jagged, broken off down to the quick. Some of them were bleeding around the cuticles. I frowned. Julian said she was scratching at the floor. That would break nails, sure. But then I saw it, underneath the jagged edge of her index finger, and packed deep into the corner of her thumbnail. It was a white powdery residue. It wasn't dust. Dust is gray. It wasn't drywall. Drywall is soft and chalky. This was gritty. It was a pale grayish white. I knew this substance. I had inspected thousands of foundations in 40 years. I had rubbed this exact powder between my fingers on construction sites from Brooklyn to Queens. It was lime mortar, specifically the type of high lime mixture used in masonry foundations before 1995. And there was something else mixed in with it. A tiny speck of red, not blood, rust, iron oxide. My mind raced back to the basement. The walls down there were concrete block, but the old coal chute, the one I had sealed up years ago behind the furnace, that was brick, mortar and brick, and the door to the coal chute was iron. If Layla was in the master bedroom scratching at wood floors or drywall, she would have wood splinters or gypsum under her nails. But she had mortar and rust. She hadn't just run down to the basement for a minute like Julian said. She had been digging. She had been clawing at the masonry for days trying to tunnel out. Julian was lying. The miscarriage story, the psychosis. It was all a script, a distraction to make me feel guilty so I would stop looking. He didn't lock her up to stop her from hurting herself. He locked her up to stop her from telling me the truth. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest, heavier than any concrete I had ever poured. I wanted to turn around and smash his face in. I wanted to grab him by his silk tie and throw him down the stairs. But I couldn't. If I reacted now, he would know I knew. He had the medical proxy. He had the power of attorney. If I got violent, he would call the police and tell them I was the crazy one. He would say I attacked him in my grief. And Layla was drugged out of her mind. She couldn't back me up. I needed to get her out, but I couldn't carry her. I was 72. I couldn't fight him and carry her down the stairs at the same time. I needed to be smarter. I needed to play the role he had written for me. I took a deep breath. I squeezed Layla's hand one last time, scraping a tiny sample of the mortar out from under her nail with my own thumbnail. I hid it in my palm. I stood up slowly. I let my shoulders slump. I let my face crumble into a mask of defeat. "Oh God," I said, letting my voice crack. "I didn't know, Julian. I am so sorry." Julian stood up and put a hand on my shoulder. It took every ounce of willpower I had not to break his wrist. "It is okay, Dad," he said. "You were just worried. I forgive you." I wiped my eyes, pretending to clear away tears. "She looks so sick," I said. Maybe we should take her to a hospital. A specialist." "No," Julian said quickly, too quickly. "The doctor said moving her would trigger another episode. She needs home care. Quiet. Isolation. That is the only way she heals." "Right?" I said, nodding. "Right. You know best. You are her husband." I looked at him. I looked right into his shark eyes. I think I need some air," I said. "This is too much. I am going to go for a drive, just for an hour, to clear my head." Julian squeezed my shoulder. "Good idea, Marcus. Take your time. We will be here." I walked out of the room. I walked down the stairs. I walked past the kitchen where the bacon was getting cold. I walked out the front door into the bright morning sun. I got into my rental car. I didn't look back at the house. I drove 2 blocks down to the corner where a gray pickup truck was parked behind a line of hedges. I pulled up alongside it. Dante rolled down his window. He saw my face. He saw the way I was gripping the steering wheel. "Mr. Thorne," he asked, "is she okay?" I opened my hand. In the center of my palm was the tiny crumble of white mortar and rust. "She is alive," I said. "But she is not in that bedroom, Dante. Not really. That is just a shell. He has been keeping her in the dark." I looked at the house in the rearview mirror. "Start the truck, kid," I said. "We have work to do. We are going to need the blueprints, and we are going to need a lawyer who isn't afraid of a fight, because I am not just going to rescue her. I am going to bury him." I sat in the passenger seat of Dante's beat-up Ford pickup truck and stared at the house I had built. From the outside, it looked perfect. The red brick facade I had laid myself in 1985 was still immaculate. The white columns on the porch were freshly painted. The lawn was green and manicured thanks to the young man sitting next to me. It looked like the American dream, but I knew better. It was a lie wrapped in brick and mortar. Dante was gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. He was a good kid. Tall, lanky, with hands that were rough from work and eyes that were too old for his 22 years. He had seen things in this neighborhood, but he had never seen anything like this. "Mr. Thorne," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper even though the windows were rolled up, You need to know what I saw. 3 nights ago, I turned to look at him. I was still clutching the tiny crumble of mortar I had scraped from Layla's fingernail. It felt like a burning coal in my palm. Tell me, Dante. Everything. He swallowed hard. It was 3 in the morning. I couldn't sleep, so I drove by to check the sprinklers. I know the timer had been acting up on zone 4. When I pulled up down the street, I saw the garage door open. He paused, looking toward the house as if he expected Julian to burst out the front door. Julian came out. He was dragging these heavy black trash bags. Contractor bags. The thick ones. He was struggling, Mr. Thorne. They were heavy. He dragged them to the trunk of his BMW. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. Heavy bags, 3 in the morning. Did you see what was inside them? I asked, my voice steady despite the horror rising in my throat. No, sir, but I smelled them. The wind was blowing right at me. He looked at me and I saw fear in his eyes. It smelled like chemicals, like ammonia. But underneath that, it smelled like meat, like something that had gone bad. I closed my eyes. Ammonia, bleach, the same smell that was choking the hallway inside the house. He did 2 trips, Dante continued. 4 bags total. Then he drove off. He was gone for about an hour. When he came back, he washed the trunk of the car with a hose. At 4 in the morning. I nodded slowly. My mind was working like a forensic accountant tallying up the debts, the bleach, the scratches, the missing money, and now the disposal of evidence. Was it a body? The thought hung in the air between us. No. Layla was alive. I had held her hand. It was hot. She was breathing. But what if those bags weren't for Layla? What if they were for the other things? Bloody sheets, clothes, or maybe the baby. Julian said she had miscarried. He said there was blood. But you don't throw the miscarriage in a trash bag and dump it in the middle of the night. You go to a hospital. You mourn. You bury, unless there was no baby, or unless the baby was just another part of the lie. I looked at Dante. Listen to me, son. You didn't see anything. Not yet. If he knows you saw him, he will come for you too. Dante nodded. I know, Mr. Thorne. That is why I called you. I need you to be my eyes, I said. I can't stay in that house. Why not, sir? We should go in there right now. We should kick down that door and get her out. I shook my head. You saw him, Dante. You saw how smooth he is. If we kick down that door, he calls the cops. He tells them I am a senile old man having a violent episode. He shows them the medical papers he made Layla sign. They will arrest me, and then he will have total control over her. He will move her. Or worse. I looked back at the house. I need to leave to fight him. I need to be outside the blast radius so I can detonate the charge. I opened the truck door. I am going back in to get my suitcase. Just my suitcase. Then I am checking into the Motel 6 off the highway. I need you to watch him, Dante. I will pay you double your weekly rate. No triple. I don't want your money, Mr. Thorne, Dante said quietly. Layla taught me piano when I was 10. She was the only one who didn't laugh at my stutter. I am doing this for her. I felt a lump in my throat. I reached out and squeezed his shoulder. You are a good man, Dante. Better than the one living in that house. Keep your phone on. I walked back up the driveway. My legs felt heavy. Every step toward that front door felt like walking into a lion's den. I entered the house. Julian was sitting in the living room reading a newspaper. He looked the picture of relaxation. The perfect husband waiting for his sick wife to wake up. He looked up as I entered. Back so soon, Marcus. I thought you were going for a long drive. I didn't look at him. I walked straight to the stairs. I am checking out Julian. You are right. I am no use here. I am just in the way. I will stay at a hotel until Layla feels better. I heard the newspaper rustle as he stood up. A hotel? Are you sure, Dad? You know you are welcome here. I stopped on the landing. I turned to face him. Am I? We stared at each other. The mask slipped for just a fraction of a second. It is probably for the best, he said, his voice dropping an octave. To be honest, Marcus, I have been worried about your memory lately. The way you barged in here last night talking about noises that weren't there. It is concerning. He took a step toward the stairs. I looked up the number for that assisted living facility in Florida, the one near the golf course. They specialize in early onset dementia. I think when Layla wakes up, we should talk about it. For your own safety, of course. There it was, the threat. He wasn't just kicking me out, he was planting the seeds. If I stayed, if I fought, he would use the system against me. He would paint me as incompetent. He would lock me away just like he locked Layla away. I gripped the banister. The wood was smooth under my hand. I had sanded this banister by hand in 1986. You might be right, Julian, I said, forcing my voice to sound defeated. I have been feeling confused. Maybe I do need professional help. He smiled. It was a victory smile. Take your time packing, Marcus. No rush. I went into the guest room. I threw my clothes into my bag. I didn't fold them. I grabbed my heart medication. I grabbed the picture of Beatrice off the nightstand. I walked out of that house 5 minutes later. I didn't say goodbye. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. Julian was standing in the window watching me leave. He thought he had won. He thought he had scared the old man off. I drove until the house disappeared from view. Then I pulled over to the side of the road. I killed the engine. I sat there in the silence and I let the memories wash over me. I remembered 1980. I was 30 years old working double shifts at the city planning office. Beatrice was pregnant with Layla. We were living in a cramped apartment in Queens where the radiator clanked all night and the water tasted like rust. I wanted better for them. I wanted a castle. I found that plot of land on Long Island. It was cheap because nobody wanted it. It was swampy, uneven, and it was in a neighborhood that wasn't exactly welcoming to people who looked like us. I remembered the day I poured the foundation. A police cruiser pulled up. 2 officers got out. They asked me if I was lost. They asked me if I was stealing construction materials. I showed them the deed. I showed them my building permit. I stood my ground. I remembered the neighbors, the whispers at the grocery store, the petitions to stop construction because my house would ruin the character of the neighborhood. I didn't stop. I worked nights. I worked weekends. I laid every brick with defiance. This house was my shield. I built the walls 12 inches thick, not just for insulation, but to keep the hate out. I installed the strongest locks. I planted the thickest hedges. I built a fortress to protect my black family from a world that wanted to crush us. And for 30 years, it worked. We were safe. We were happy. Layla grew up running on that lawn. Beatrice planted her hydrangeas. We had barbecues. We had graduations. We forced the world to respect us through the sheer, undeniable quality of our existence. And now the enemy wasn't the police officer patrolling the street. It wasn't the neighbor with the petition. The enemy was inside the gates. He was sleeping in my bed. He was drinking my wine. He was beating my daughter on the floors I had polished. I had built a fortress to keep the monsters out, but I had forgotten that sometimes you open the door and invite the monster in for dinner. I wiped a tear from my eye. It wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of clarity. I started the car. I wasn't going to Florida. I wasn't going to a nursing home. I drove to the Motel 6. I checked into room 104, the one on the ground floor with a view of the parking lot. I unpacked my suitcase. I set up my command center on the cheap laminate desk. I took out the blueprints of the house. I always kept a copy. I smoothed out the wrinkled paper. I traced the lines of the foundation with my finger. I knew things about that house that Julian didn't. I knew about the crawl space behind the pantry. I knew about the ventilation shaft that ran from the attic to the basement, which was wide enough for a man to slide down if he was desperate enough. And I knew about the structural weakness in the retaining wall of the wine cellar. Julian wanted to play games with locks and keys. He wanted to use the law and medicine as weapons. Fine, but he was fighting a man who knew how to bring a house down without using a single stick of dynamite. My phone buzzed. It was Dante. He is leaving the house, Mr. Thorne. He is in the BMW. He is heading toward the city. I looked at the blueprints. Good, I said. Tail him. But don't get too close. I am going to make a phone call. Who are you calling? Dante asked. The police. No, I said. I am calling the bank. And then I am going to the hardware store. I hung up. I looked at the drawing of the basement. I circled the coal chute. You want to bury my daughter in my own basement? Julian, you better dig 2 graves. The air conditioning in the First National Bank branch was set to 68 degrees, but I was sweating. It wasn't the heat. It was the cold knot of dread sitting in my stomach right next to my heart medication. I walked across the polished marble floor, listening to the click of my dress shoes echoing off the high ceilings. I have banked here for 40 years. I knew the manager Bill Henderson back when he was just a teller with a bad haircut and a cheap suit. I trusted this place, just like I trusted the foundation of my house. But as I stood in line watching the young teller count out a stack of crisp $100 bills for the woman in front of me, I realized that trust is a fragile thing. It takes decades to build and only seconds to shatter. I stepped up to the window. The teller was new. Her name tag said Sarah. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile they teach you in training videos. Bright, cheerful, and completely empty. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" I slid my debit card across the counter. "Good morning, Sarah. I need to make a withdrawal from the Thorne Family Trust, just a few thousand for expenses." She took the card and typed something into her keyboard. Her long nails clicked against the plastic keys. Click, 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 like the sound of beetles scuttling inside a wall. She frowned. She typed again. Harder this time. I watched her face. I have spent my life reading faces. Contractors lying about using cheap concrete. Landlords lying about faulty wiring. I know the look of someone who sees something they don't want to see. Her smile vanished. She looked up at me and then quickly looked away. "One moment, Mr. Thorne. I need to get a manager override. The system is a little slow today." She didn't wait for an answer. She spun around and hurried toward the glass-walled office at the back of the branch. I watched her knock on the door and step inside. I saw Bill Henderson look up from his desk. I saw Sarah whisper something. I saw Bill's face go pale. He looked through the glass at me. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He picked up a file from his desk and stood up, smoothing down his tie. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. Bill walked out of the office. He didn't come to the counter. He walked around the gate and approached me in the lobby. He extended his hand, but his eyes were darting around as if looking for security. "Marcus," he said, "it has been a while. Why don't we go back to my office? It is more private." I didn't shake his hand. "What is wrong with my account, Bill? Please, Marcus, just come with me. We don't want to make a scene in the lobby." A scene. That word again. Everyone was so afraid of me making a scene. Julian. Now Bill. As if an old black man asking questions was inherently dangerous. I followed him into the office. He closed the door and gestured for me to sit. I didn't sit. I stood by the door, blocking the exit. "Talk to me, Bill. Why did your teller look like she just saw a ghost?" Bill sighed and sat down behind his heavy mahogany desk. He opened the file. "Marcus, I assumed you knew." "I mean, given the paperwork we received, I thought this was all part of the plan." "What plan?" "The liquidation," Bill said. "The trust account is empty, Marcus. It was closed out 3 days ago." The room spun. I had to reach out and grab the back of the leather chair to steady myself. Empty. That account had $300,000 in it. My life savings. The money from Beatrice's life insurance. The money for Layla's future. Closed out. I repeated, my voice sounding hollow. "Who closed it?" Bill looked at the file. "Your son-in-law, Julian, using the authorized access you granted him. He transferred the balance to an offshore entity in the Cayman Islands. He said it was for tax optimization for the family estate." I felt the blood drain from my face. I never granted him access, Bill. I never signed anything giving him control over that trust. That money was for Layla and me. Julian's name is not on the paperwork. Bill hesitated. He pulled a sheet of paper from the file. He slid it across the desk slowly, like he was pushing a loaded gun toward me. "Marcus, this is the updated signature card and authorization form. It was notarized 2 months ago." I picked up the paper. My hand was shaking so bad the text blurred. I blinked to clear my vision. There it was, my signature, Marcus Elijah Thorne. It looked perfect. The loop on the M, the sharp cross on the T. It was my signature, but I hadn't signed it. 2 months ago I was in the hospital getting a stent put in my heart. I wasn't signing bank documents. "It is a forgery, Bill," I said, slamming the paper down. "A damn good one, but it is a fake. Check the security footage. Did I come in here? Did you see me sign this?" "No," Bill said softly. "It was done remotely, sent via courier. But the notary stamp is valid, Marcus. And that is not all." He flipped the page. There was another document underneath. 3 weeks ago, a home equity line of credit was opened against your property, the maximum amount, $700,000. My knees finally gave out. I sank into the chair. He mortgaged my house. The house I paid off in 1998, the house that was free and clear, $700,000. "Where is the money, Bill?" Dispersed, Bill said. "Into the same offshore account, so he has $1 million of my money," I whispered. "And I have nothing." Bill looked uncomfortable. He loosened his collar. "Marcus, there is something else. When I flagged these transactions as unusual, when I called to verify, I spoke to Julian. He sent over a document that legally ties our hands. He pulled out the last document in the file. It was thick, blue legal paper, a durable power of attorney. I stared at the cover page. I knew what this was. I had seen families torn apart by these documents. It gave one person total legal control over another person's life, finances, medical decisions, property. But to get a power of attorney, the principal ME has to sign it willingly. I opened the document. There was my signature again. And there was Layla's signature as the witness. And then I saw the clause on page 4. The clause that made my blood run cold. Reason for activation: incapacity of principal due to cognitive decline and early-stage dementia. I looked up at Bill. "He thinks I am crazy," I whispered. Bill looked down at his hands. "He sent us a letter from a Dr. Marcus, a Dr. Aris Thorne, no relation, I assume. The letter states that you have been suffering from memory lapses, paranoia, and violent outbursts. It says you are no longer fit to manage your own affairs. It designates Julian as the sole guardian of the estate." I sat there in the silence of the bank office. The only sound was the hum of the hard drive on Bill's desk. It was a trap. A meticulously constructed steel cage trap. Julian hadn't just stolen my money. He had stolen my credibility. He had built a legal narrative that said I was losing my mind. If I went to the police now and said my son-in-law stole my money, they would pull up this file. They would see the doctor's note. They would see the power of attorney. And they would say, "Go home, old man, your son-in-law is taking care of you." He had planned this for months. The trip to Florida wasn't a vacation. It was the window of opportunity to move the money while I was out of state so I wouldn't see the transaction alerts. And Layla, he made her sign as a witness. Did she know what she was signing? Or was she drugged then too? Or did he threaten her? I looked at the date on the power of attorney. It was dated 6 months ago. 6 months. He had been planning to erase me for half a year. While he sat at my dinner table, while he ate my food, while he called me Dad, he was a termite. He had eaten the inside of the beam, leaving only the paint so it looked solid until the moment it collapsed. I closed the file. My hands were steady now. The shock had passed. What was left was the cold, hard clarity of a demolition expert surveying a condemned building. "Bill," I said, standing up, "I need copies of everything. Every check, every transfer, the IP addresses of the computers used to access the accounts, the name of the notary, the name of this so-called doctor." Bill looked nervous. "Marcus, I am not sure if I can... Technically, Julian is the account holder now." I leaned over the desk. I put my face inches from his. I didn't shout. I didn't look crazy. I looked like the man who had inspected foundations for 40 years and knew exactly where to strike to bring a wall down. "Bill, we have known each other a long time. You know I am not crazy. You know I built this town's infrastructure. If you don't give me those copies, I will walk out of here and I will come back with a federal subpoena. And I will sue this bank for facilitating elder abuse and identity theft. And I will make sure your name is on the front page of the lawsuit." Bill swallowed hard. He nodded. "Okay, Marcus. Okay. Just keep this between us for now." He went to the copier. 10 minutes later, I walked out of the bank with a thick manila envelope tucked under my jacket. I stepped out into the bright sunlight. The world looked the same. The traffic was moving. People were drinking coffee. But my world had vanished. I was broke. My house belonged to the bank. And legally, I was a senile old man who couldn't be trusted with a checkbook. I walked to my rental car. I sat in the driver's seat and looked at the envelope. He took my money. He took my house. He took my daughter. He left me with nothing. But he made one mistake. He left me with my freedom. He thought the paper made him safe. He thought the law was a shield. But I knew something about the law. The law is like a blueprint. It tells you how things should be built. But it doesn't tell you what happens when someone takes a sledgehammer to the load-bearing wall. I started the car. I wasn't going back to the motel. Not yet. I looked at the name of the notary on the document, Sandra Jenkins. I knew that name. She worked at a shipping store down on 4th Street, a place that didn't ask too many questions if you slipped them an extra 50. And the doctor, Dr. Eris Thorne. I pulled out my phone and searched the name. No results found in the State Medical Board database. He was a ghost. A fake. Julian had gotten arrogant. He had gotten sloppy. He thought I wouldn't check. He thought I would just roll over and die in a nursing home. I put the car in gear. "You want to play with paper, Julian?" I said to the empty car. "Fine. Let's see whose paper burns faster." We sat in Dante's truck 3 houses down watching the driveway. It was 8 o'clock at night. The streetlights had just flickered on, casting long orange shadows across the pavement. My hands were resting on my knees and I forced them to stay still. I wanted to strangle Julian, but I knew I had to wait. We had been tracking him for 2 days. We knew his schedule. We knew that on Tuesday nights he told Layla or whoever he was talking to that he had a late meeting with European investors. But we knew the truth. Dante had followed him last week. Julian didn't go to an office. He went to the Sapphire Club, a high-stakes poker room in the back of a cigar lounge downtown. And after that, he usually visited a woman named Veronica at a motel on the interstate. He was a creature of habit, and his habit was vice. "There he is," Dante whispered. The garage door opened. The BMW slid out silently. It looked like a shark moving through dark water. Julian was wearing a tuxedo. He looked sharp. He looked rich. He looked like a man who didn't have a care in the world. He certainly didn't look like a man whose wife was supposedly in a psychotic coma upstairs. We waited until his taillights disappeared around the corner. Then we waited another 10 minutes just to be sure he wasn't circling back. "Okay, kid," I said, opening the truck door. "Grab the bag." We moved quickly through the shadows of the neighbor's hedge. The air was cool, but I was sweating. I was 72 years old and I was about to break into my own house. It felt absurd. It felt necessary. We reached the side door, the one I had entered the other night. I unlocked it with my skeleton key. We slipped into the mudroom. The smell was still there, that chemical bleach smell. But tonight it was mixed with something else, something stale, like air that had been trapped underground for too long. We walked to the basement door. The hallway was dark. Dante turned on his flashlight, keeping the beam low. When the light hit the door, he gasped, "Jesus, Mr. Thorne, look at that." I looked. The 3 heavy-duty padlocks were still there gleaming in the light. They were impressive. To a layman, they looked unbreakable. To a thief with a crowbar, they would be a nightmare. You would have to smash the door frame to get through, and that would make enough noise to wake the dead. But I wasn't a thief, and I wasn't a layman. I was a builder. And I knew that every metal has a melting point, and every alloy has a chemical weakness. I opened my bag. I didn't pull out a hammer. I pulled out a small plastic squeeze bottle and a syringe. "What is that?" Dante whispered. "Hydrochloric acid mixed with a little hydrogen peroxide," I whispered back. "It is a little cocktail we used to use to clean concrete trucks, but in high concentration it eats through soft metals like brass and zinc." "But those locks are steel," Dante said. "The shackles are steel," I said. "But the pins inside the cylinder, the springs, those are brass. We don't need to cut the lock, kid. We just need to give it a heart attack." I put on my safety glasses and gloves. My hands were steady now. This was work. This was just a problem to be solved. I inserted the needle of the syringe into the keyhole of the top padlock. I squeezed the plunger gently. The liquid hissed as it hit the metal inside. A tiny wisp of white smoke curled up. It smelled sharp and acrid like burning batteries. We waited. The acid bubbled. I could hear tiny pops and clicks from inside the lock as the delicate springs dissolved and the tumblers collapsed. I moved to the second lock, then the third. It took 15 minutes. 15 minutes of standing in the dark, listening to the house settle, listening to the acid do its work. "Okay," I said. "Hand me the tension wrench." I took the small metal tool and inserted it into the first lock. I applied a tiny amount of pressure. The lock didn't click. It just gave way. The internal mechanism had turned to mush. The shackle popped open with a dull thud. I removed the second one, then the third. Dante looked at me with wide eyes. "Remind me never to make you angry, Mr. Thorne." I didn't smile. I carefully placed the locks on the floor. I put my hand on the doorknob. This was it. Julian had said the basement was flooded. He said there was 3 feet of water. If he was telling the truth, opening this door would unleash a flood into the hallway. But I knew he was lying. I just prayed I was right. I turned the knob. I pulled the door open. There was no water. There was no rush of liquid, no damp humidity hitting my face. Instead, there was a blast of cold, dry air. and silence. Dead silence. We shined our flashlights down the stairs. The wooden steps I had built were covered in carpet, not normal carpet. It was thick acoustic foam, the kind they use in recording studios. It was stapled to every step. "He soundproofed it," Dante whispered. I felt a chill go down my spine. "You don't soundproof a basement for a sick wife. You soundproof it for a prisoner." We walked down. My legs were trembling. I wasn't the strong inspector anymore. I was a terrified father. We reached the bottom. The basement wasn't a basement anymore. The open space where I used to keep my workbench and the pool table was gone. Julian had built walls. Temporary walls made of plywood and covered in layers of gray egg crate foam. It looked like a padded cell. There was no water on the floor. The concrete was bone dry. We walked into the center of the room. There was a single mattress on the floor. It was stained. Next to it was a bucket, and a metal dog bowl with some dried oatmeal in it. A dog bowl. He fed my daughter out of a dog bowl. I felt my knees give out. I grabbed Dante's arm to steady myself. The rage was so hot it blinded me for a second. I wanted to burn the house down. I wanted to find Julian and tear him apart with my bare hands. "Mr. Thorne," Dante said, his voice shaking, "look at the walls." I looked. The drywall between the foam panels was exposed, and it was covered in scratches, thousands of them, but they weren't random. I stepped closer, shining my light on the white plaster. The scratches formed letters, crude, jagged letters carved by fingernails that had been broken and bleeding. "Don't sign." The words were etched over and over again. "Don't sign. Don't sign. Don't sign." And below that, in smaller, shakier letters, "Daddy, help. He is lying, not crazy." I reached out and touched the words. I could feel the desperation in the grooves. I could feel her pain. She had been down here alone in the dark, listening to Julian lie to me upstairs, knowing I was so close and yet so far away. "She fought," I whispered. "She fought him every inch of the way." I looked around the room frantically. "Layla," I called out. "Layla, where are you?" There was no answer. The room was empty. The mattress was cold. The bucket was dry. "He moved her," Dante said. "He knew. He knew you were suspicious." I ran to the corner where the old coal chute used to be. The bricks were undisturbed. I checked the utility closet. Empty. I stood in the middle of that soundproofed hell and I felt a scream building in my chest. I had been too slow. I had played his game, and because of that he had time to move her. "Where is she?" I yelled at the empty walls. "Where is my daughter?" Then I saw something. On the floor near the mattress. It was a small piece of paper. Not paper. It was a wrapper. I picked it up. It was a foil wrapper for a syringe. I looked closely at the label. Ketamine hydrochloride. Veterinary use only. Horse tranquilizer. He didn't just move her. He knocked her out. He turned her into dead weight so he could drag her out to the car without her screaming. "That is what the black bags were for," Dante said behind me. "He didn't put her in the bags. He used the bags to cover her so the neighbors wouldn't see him carrying a body." I crushed the wrapper in my fist. "He took her 3 nights ago. That means she has been gone for 72 hours. I looked at the walls again. "Daddy, help." I failed her. "I built this house to be a fortress, but I let the enemy take the keys." "No, Mr. Thorne," Dante said, stepping in front of me. "You didn't fail her. We found this place. We know the truth now. He can't lie about the flu anymore. We have evidence. Evidence I spat. We have an empty room and a wrapper. If we go to the police now, Julian will say Layla is in a private clinic. He will say she did this to the walls herself because she is insane. He will say, I broke in and planted the drugs." I looked at the acoustic foam. He is smart, Dante. He is evil, but he is smart. He cleaned the scene, but he missed something. I walked over to the corner of the room where the new plywood wall met the original concrete foundation. There was a gap, a small gap where the construction was sloppy. I shined my light into the gap. There was something wedged in there, something shiny. I pulled out my pocket knife and fished it out. It was a bracelet, a simple silver charm bracelet. I had given it to Layla for her 16th birthday. It had a charm of a piano, a charm of a house, and a charm of a heart. But there was a new charm on it, one I hadn't seen before. It was a small USB drive attached to the chain. "She hid it," I whispered. She knew he would take her phone. She knew he would strip her of everything, so she hid this. I held it up. It was tiny. Easy to miss if you were just dragging a body out in a hurry. What is on it? Dante asked. I don't know, I said, clutching the bracelet to my chest. But Layla is a smart girl. She is my daughter. She wouldn't leave a note if she could leave a recording. I put the bracelet in my pocket. Let's go, I said. We need to get out of here before he comes back, and we need to find a computer. We climbed the stairs, leaving the soundproofed dungeon behind. I felt different now. When I walked down those stairs, I was a victim. I was a confused old man. But climbing back up, I was a hunter. I had the scent. I had the trail. And Julian was about to find out that you can lock a door and you can soundproof a wall, but you cannot silence the truth. We slipped out into the night, leaving the broken locks on the floor as a message. I wanted him to know. I wanted him to come home and see that his cage had been breached. I wanted him to be afraid. Because fear makes people make mistakes, and I was counting on him making one more. We were still standing in the center of that soundproof nightmare when the lights went out. 1 second, Dante and I were shining our flashlights on the scratches on the wall, and the next second, the overhead bulb I had turned on flickered and died. We were plunged into absolute darkness. The silence of the basement, which had been heavy before, now felt suffocating. It pressed against my ears like water. Dante whispered, "Mr. Thorne, did you hit the switch?" I didn't move. My hand was gripping the small glass vial I had just pulled from the trash can in the corner. It wasn't just a wrapper like I thought, it was the bottle itself, ketamine, enough to knock out a horse, enough to stop a human heart if the dosage was wrong. "Shh," I hissed. "Kill your light." We stood there in the pitch black. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that echoed in my own skull. I listened. I strained my ears past the ringing of my high blood pressure. And then I heard it. It wasn't a footstep. It was the slow, deliberate click of the deadbolt at the top of the stairs, the one we had just picked. Someone was locking us in. Julian. He hadn't gone to the city, or if he did, he had turned around. Maybe he had a camera we missed. Maybe a silent alarm on the basement door. He knew we were here. Dante grabbed my arm. His grip was terrified. "What do we do?" he whispered. We didn't have time to answer. The door at the top of the stairs opened. Light flooded down the staircase. It was a sharp, blinding rectangle that cut through the darkness. A silhouette stepped into the frame. It was Julian. He wasn't wearing his tuxedo anymore. He was in his shirt sleeves, his tie loosened. He was holding a phone in one hand, and he was filming us. "Well, well, well," he said. His voice echoed off the concrete walls. The acoustic foam absorbed the sharpness, but it couldn't absorb the venom. "Look what we have here. A break-in in progress, and by my own family, no less." He started walking down the stairs, slowly, casually. He didn't look angry. He looked entertained. I stepped in front of Dante, shielding the kid with my body. I held up the vial of ketamine. "Where is she, Julian?" I shouted. "I found the drugs. I found the room. You can't lie your way out of this one. Where is my daughter?" Julian stopped on the bottom step. He looked around the room, examining the walls, the mattress, the bucket. He didn't look ashamed. He looked like a landlord inspecting a tenant's mess. "You really are a persistent old man, aren't you, Marcus?" he said, shaking his head. "I give you a chance to leave with dignity. I offer you a nice retirement in Florida. But you just had to come back and dig through the trash." He pointed the phone camera right at my face. "Say hello to the cloud, Marcus. This video is being uploaded to a private server as we speak." "I don't care about your video," I growled. "I care about the woman you dragged out of here in a body bag 3 nights ago. Is she dead, Julian? Did you kill her?" Julian laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. "Dead. You really have a vivid imagination." "No, Marcus. She isn't dead. Although sometimes I think she would be easier to manage if she were." He took a step closer. "She is in a specialized facility upstate, a rehab center for difficult cases. The drugs you found, those were necessary. She was violent, Marcus. She was hurting herself. Look at the walls. She did that. She clawed at the drywall until her fingers bled. I had to sedate her to get her into the car, for her own safety." "You are lying," I said, stepping forward. I gripped the utility knife I had used to pry the bracelet from the wall. I forgot I was holding it. My knuckles were white. "You kidnapped her. You forged her signature. You stole my money, and now I am going to make sure you never see daylight again." Julian's eyes flicked down to my hand, to the knife. A slow smile spread across his face. It was the smile of a chess player who just saw his opponent make a fatal blunder. He raised the phone higher. Did you hear that he said, speaking to the camera? He just threatened to kill me. And look, he is armed. He looked back at me. You know what this looks like, Marcus. An estranged father-in-law with a history of dementia breaks into a private residence at night. He is confused, paranoid. He thinks his daughter is missing when she is actually receiving medical care. And when the homeowner confronts him, he pulls a knife. He shook his head mockingly. In the state of New York, that is burglary in the first degree. Assault with a deadly weapon. And given your age and your condition, I don't think you will go to prison. I think you will go to a high-security psychiatric ward. The kind where they strap you to a bed and feed you through a tube. I looked down at the knife in my hand. It was a small, rusty box cutter. A tool. But in his narrative, it was a weapon. I realized then that I had walked right into his trap. He hadn't come back early by accident. He had lured us here. He wanted me to break in. He wanted this footage. I lowered the knife. You think you are smart? I said, my voice trembling with rage. But you forgot one thing. I am not the only one who knows. Dante is here. He is a witness. Julian looked at Dante for the first time. He looked at him like he was a stain on the carpet. Dante, he said. The gardener. You know, Dante, I am disappointed. I thought you were a loyal employee. But now I see you are just an accomplice. He tapped his phone screen. I just texted the police chief. He is a golf buddy of mine. I told him I have intruders in my basement. Armed intruders. They are about 5 minutes away. Dante, panic flared in his eyes. He looked at me. Mr. Thorne, we have to go. Julian stepped aside, clearing the path to the stairs. He gestured with his hand like a gracious host. Go ahead, he said. Run. If you run, you look guilty. If you stay, you get arrested. Either way, Marcus, you lose. He leaned in close to me. His breath smelled of expensive scotch and mints. You have lost everything, old man. The house, the money, the daughter. And now your freedom. If I were you, I would drop that knife and start pleading insanity. It is your only card left. I looked at him. I looked at the smug satisfaction in his eyes. He thought he had won. He thought he had checkmated me. And legally, maybe he had. But he didn't know about the bracelet in my pocket. He didn't know about the USB drive. And he didn't know that I wasn't playing chess. I was playing demolition. I dropped the knife. It clattered on the concrete floor. I am not crazy, Julian, I said quietly. And I am not running. I turned to Dante. Go, kid. Get out the back way. Take the truck. Don't stop until you get to the safe house. But, Mr. Thorne, Dante stammered. I can't leave you. Go, I shouted. That was an order. Dante looked at me one last time, then turned and bolted up the stairs past Julian. Julian didn't stop him. He just watched him go with a smirk. One rat scurries away, Julian said. But the big rat stays. He looked at me. So what is it going to be, Marcus? Are we going to wait for the police or are you going to beg? I might be persuaded to drop the charges if you sign a few more papers. Maybe a confession admitting your incompetence. We could put you in a nice home, a quiet one, far away from here. I looked at the walls one last time. Daddy, help. I looked at Julian. I will never sign anything you give me, I said, and I will never stop looking for her. You can put me in jail. You can put me in a padded room. But as long as I have breath in my body, I am coming for you. Julian sighed. Have it your way then. We heard sirens in the distance. They were getting louder. Julian checked his watch. Right on time. You know, Marcus, I almost feel bad for you. You built this house, didn't you? And now you are going to be dragged out of it in handcuffs. It is poetic, really. He turned and started walking up the stairs. Stay put, he called back. The officers will want to see exactly where you were standing when you threatened me. I stood alone in the basement. The sirens were wailing now right outside the house. Blue and red lights flashed against the high windows, casting manic shadows on the soundproof foam. I reached into my pocket and squeezed the bracelet. The sharp edge of the USB drive dug into my thumb. He thought this was the end. He thought the game was over, but the game had just begun. I wasn't the mouse, and he wasn't the cat. He was the termite, and I was the exterminator. I put my hands behind my head and waited for the police to kick down the door. Let them come. Let them arrest me. It would only get me closer to the legal system. And once I was in the system, I could start tearing it down from the inside. The front door crashed open. Heavy boots pounded on the floorboards upstairs. Police, come out with your hands up. I took a deep breath. I am down here, I yelled, and I am unarmed. As the officers swarmed down the stairs, guns drawn, I didn't look at them. I looked at the spot where Julian had stood. Enjoy your victory lap, son, I thought. because when the dust settles, I will be the one standing on the rubble. I stood there with my hands raised as two uniformed officers descended the stairs, guns drawn. Their flashlights cut through the gloom of the soundproofed basement, blinding me. I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I looked past the barrels of their Glocks at Julian, who was standing on the landing with that look of practiced concern plastered on his face. He was whispering to a sergeant, pointing at me, shaking his head as if this whole situation was just a tragic family misunderstanding. And in a way it was. Just not the way they thought. "Drop to your knees," one officer shouted. I did as I was told. My knees hit the concrete hard. The cold seeped through my trousers, instantly reminding me of the rheumatism that usually flared up when rain was coming. But there was no rain tonight, just a storm of a different kind. "Don't hurt him," Julian called out, his voice thick with fake empathy. "Please, officers, he is my father-in-law. He is confused. He has a condition." I felt the cold steel of handcuffs click around my wrists. It was a sound I never thought I would hear applied to me. I was Marcus Thorne. I was the man who inspected the city jail when it was built. I was a pillar of this community. Now I was just a suspect, a senile old man who broke into a rich man's house. They hauled me up. My shoulders screamed in protest. "You have the right to remain silent," the officer began. I looked at Julian. He was smiling. Just a tiny lift at the corner of his mouth, visible only to me. He had won. He had the video of me holding the knife. He had the narrative. If I fought this, if I started screaming about kidnappings and forged signatures right now while in handcuffs, I would sound exactly like the lunatic he claimed I was. The police would drag me to the precinct, then to a psychiatric hold. And once I was in the system, medicated and labeled, Layla would be lost forever. I made a choice. The hardest choice of my life. I swallowed my pride. It tasted like bile. I let my shoulders slump. I let my face go slack, losing the hardness of the investigator and taking on the softness of the defeated. "I am sorry," I mumbled, looking down at my shoes. I thought I heard her." The officer paused mid-Miranda warning. He looked at Julian. "Is he okay, sir?" Julian walked down the stairs, sighing heavily. "It is like I told you, Sergeant. He has been having episodes. He thinks my wife, his daughter, is trapped down here. He gets disoriented. I didn't want to press charges, but when he pulled the knife, I got scared." I looked up at Julian. I forced tears into my eyes. "I just wanted to see Layla," I whimpered. My voice trembled. "I didn't mean to scare you, Julian. I miss her." Julian looked at the police. "See, he is harmless, really. Just sick. Look, I don't want him in jail. He built this house for God's sake. It would break my wife's heart if she knew her father was sitting in a cell." He turned to me. "Marcus, if I ask the officers to let you go, will you promise to leave? Will you promise to go back to Florida and get the treatment Dr. Aris recommended?" He was offering me a way out, not out of kindness, but out of convenience. He didn't want a trial. He didn't want lawyers digging into why the basement was soundproofed. He wanted me gone. I looked at him. I saw the arrogance in his eyes. He thought he was being generous. He thought he was the benevolent king granting mercy to the peasant. I nodded. "Yes," I said softly. "Yes, Julian, you win. I am tired. I don't want to fight anymore. I just want to go home." Julian turned to the sergeant. "Can we release him into my custody? I will make sure he gets to the airport. I will pay for the ticket myself." The sergeant looked from me to Julian, then back to me. He saw an old man who looked broken. He saw a wealthy young man in a tuxedo who looked reasonable. "All right, Mr. Thorne," the sergeant said, unlocking the cuffs. "But this is a warning. You stay away from this property. If we come back here again, you are going downtown." I rubbed my wrists. "Thank you, officer," I said. "Thank you." Julian walked me to my rental car. The police stayed back watching from the porch. As I opened the car door, Julian leaned in close. "You made the right choice, Marcus," he whispered. His breath smelled of victory. "Go back to the golf course. Die in the sun. Don't make me bury you in the snow." I looked at him one last time. "Take care of her, Julian," I said. "Please." "I will take care of her exactly as well as she deserves," he said with a smirk. I got into the car. I started the engine. I drove away slowly, carefully, using my turn signal. I drove until the police lights faded in the rearview mirror. I drove until the house was just a memory in the darkness. And then the mask fell off. I slammed my hand against the steering wheel. I screamed, a raw primal sound that tore at my throat. I screamed for the humiliation. I screamed for the lies I had to tell. I screamed for the image of my daughter's fingernails scratching words into the drywall. But then silence returned, and with it clarity. He thinks I am gone. He thinks I am on my way to JFK to catch the red eye to Fort Lauderdale. He thinks the threat is neutralized. I pulled over to the side of the highway. I took out my phone. I removed the SIM card and snapped it in half. I rolled down the window and threw it into the ditch. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out a burner phone I had bought at a gas station 2 days ago. Cash only. I dialed Dante. Mr. Thorne, the kid, answered on the first ring. His voice was breathless. "Are you okay? I saw the cops. I was circling the block ready to, I don't know, ram the patrol car or something." I chuckled darkly. "Don't ram any patrol cars, Dante. I am free. Free." "Did he let you go?" "He thinks he let me go," I said, putting the car back in gear. "He thinks he banished me. I need a place to stay, kid, not a hotel. He will check the credit cards. I need somewhere off the grid, somewhere I can work without being seen." "There is the shed," Dante said. "It is behind my aunt's old upholstery shop in Queens. It is essentially a warehouse. No heat, no water, but it has power, and nobody goes there." "Perfect," I said. "Send me the address, and Dante, bring the truck. We have work to do." I drove to Queens. The city lights blurred past me. I felt like a ghost. Marcus Thorne, the respected citizen, was dead. He died in that basement when the handcuffs went on. The man driving the car was someone else, someone colder, someone who understood that the law wasn't a shield, it was a weapon, and right now that weapon was in the hands of the enemy. I arrived at the warehouse at 2 a.m. It was a corrugated metal structure sitting in an overgrown lot filled with rusted car parts and old tires. It was ugly. It was cold. It was perfect. Dante met me at the gate. He looked at me with worry in his eyes. "Mr. Thorne, you can't stay here. It is freezing. You have a heart condition." I got out of the car and looked at the rusted padlock on the gate. "My heart is fine, Dante," I said. "It is pumping hate right now, and that keeps a man warmer than any heater." We went inside. The space was filled with dust and the smell of old oil. I cleared off a workbench. I set down my laptop. I set down the blueprints of my house. And I took out the silver bracelet with the USB drive. "This is my command center now," I said, looking around. "Julian thinks the war is over because he won the battle. He thinks power comes from money and status. He thinks because he is a young white man in a suit and I am an old black man in a windbreaker, that the natural order of things is for him to rule and me to obey." I opened the laptop. "But he forgot where he lives, Dante. He lives in a house built by me. He walks on floors laid by me. He sleeps under a roof framed by me." I plugged in the USB drive. "He thinks he is the master of the castle, but he is just a squatter. And I am the landlord coming to collect the rent." I looked at the screen. A folder popped up. It was labeled simply Truth. I clicked it. Dozens of files appeared. Audio recordings, scanned documents, photos. Layla hadn't just been hiding, she had been spying. I clicked on an audio file dated 3 weeks ago. Julian's voice filled the cold warehouse. "Listen to me, Patrick. I mean Julian. If the old man doesn't die soon, we have a problem. The trust fund is almost drained. I need that signature on the reverse mortgage. Just drug him if you have to. He is useless anyway." My hand tightened into a fist. "Patrick." I paused the recording. "His name isn't Julian," I whispered. "It's Patrick." I turned to Dante. "We are going to do a background check, Dante, but not on Julian Miller. We are going to look for Patrick, and we are going to look in Nevada. That is where he said he was from, right?" Dante nodded, pulling up a chair. "Mr. Thorne," Dante asked quietly, "what happens when we find him? What happens when we prove who he is? Do we call the police then?" I looked at the screen. I looked at the waveform of his voice planning my murder. "No," I said. "Police are for criminals. This man, this thing, he is a cancer. You don't arrest cancer. You cut it out." I leaned back in the creaky metal chair. "He wants me to be silent. He wants the quiet adjustment. Fine, I will give him silence. I am going to disappear, Dante. For the next 48 hours, Marcus Thorne does not exist. I am going to let him get comfortable. I am going to let him think he is safe. I want him to sign those papers to sell the house. I want him to stand at the closing table thinking he has pulled off the heist of the century." And then I said, tapping the enter key to start the search, Then I am going to bring the roof down on his head. I looked at the bracelet sitting on the desk next to the computer. It was small, delicate silver. "Hold on, Layla," I whispered to the cold air. "Daddy is working." I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the freezing warehouse, wrapped in a moving blanket, drinking lukewarm coffee from a thermos. I watched the progress bar on the screen as my search algorithms crawled through the dark corners of the internet. I was a building inspector. My job was to look past the fresh paint and the nice landscaping to see the rot underneath. And Julian was rotten to the core. By sunrise, I had a name: Patrick O'Connell, wanted in Las Vegas for insurance fraud and homicide. I looked at the mugshot on the screen. It was younger, no beard, no expensive haircut, but the eyes were the same. Those dead shark eyes. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Got you," I whispered. Julian thought he had sent an old man to Florida to die. Instead, he had just armed a bomb. We spent the next 48 hours living in the cab of Dante's truck and the freezing warehouse. I drank so much stale coffee my hands should have been shaking, but they were steady as stone. I was fueled by something stronger than caffeine. I was fueled by the cold, hard clarity of a man who finally knows the name of the devil he is fighting. Patrick O'Connell, a con artist, a murderer, and the man currently sleeping in my master bedroom. We tracked him. We learned his routine. He wasn't a complex man. He was driven by two things: greed and vice. On the second night, we followed the BMW to a part of town I hadn't visited in 20 years. It was an industrial district on the edge of the city where the streetlights were broken and the shadows were long. Julian pulled into the parking lot of the Starlight Motel. It was a place where they rented rooms by the hour and the sheets were probably never changed. Dante killed the headlights. We watched from across the street. "He is keeping her here," Dante whispered, gripping the steering wheel. "That is why the basement was empty. He moved her to this dump." I looked at the motel through my binoculars. I saw Julian get out of the car. He looked out of place in his designer suit amidst the rusted pickup trucks and the peeling paint. He knocked on the door of room 12. A woman opened it. She was young, blonde, wearing a silk robe that looked like it cost more than the entire building. She threw her arms around his neck and kissed him. It wasn't Layla. It was the mistress, the woman he was spending my money on while my daughter rotted somewhere in the dark. I watched them go inside and close the curtains. I felt a surge of disgust so powerful I almost threw up. But then I felt something else. Relief. "Layla isn't here, Dante," I said, lowering the binoculars. "How do you know Mr. Thorne? She could be in the bathroom, or tied up in the closet." "No," I said, shaking my head. "Patrick O'Connell is a narcissist." I read his file. He likes control. He likes to be the king of his castle. He wouldn't leave his most valuable asset, my daughter, in a cheap motel room with a loose cannon mistress. It is too risky. Too many variables. If Layla screamed here, someone might call the cops. I looked back at the motel door. He keeps his toys where he can see them. He keeps them close. We waited for an hour. Julian came out looking disheveled and smug. He got back in his car and drove toward the house. "He is going home," I said. "And so are we. But not to the front door. We are going to the digital back door." We drove back to the warehouse. I opened my laptop. I spread the blueprints of the house out on the workbench under the flickering fluorescent light. I stared at the drawings. I had drawn these lines with a drafting pencil in 1989. I knew every inch, every crawl space, every void. If he didn't take her out of the house, I muttered to myself. And she isn't in the basement, and she isn't in the bedrooms. Where is she? I traced the layout of the first floor. Kitchen, dining room, living room, library. My finger stopped on the library. I remembered building that room. It was my pride and joy. Floor-to-ceiling mahogany bookshelves, a rolling ladder, and behind the north wall, I froze. The panic room. I had built a small, reinforced room behind the main bookcase. It was 1990, the height of the crime wave in New York. I was paranoid about home invasions. I built it to hide my family in case of an emergency. It had a separate ventilation system. It was soundproofed. The entrance was hidden behind a false section of the shelf that opened only if you pulled a specific book. The Count of Monte Cristo. I hadn't opened that room in 15 years. I used it for storage, old tax returns, holiday decorations. I assumed Julian didn't even know it existed. But Julian was a termite, He had bored into every corner of my life. Of course he found it. Dante, I said, my voice tight. I need you to pull up the network scanner. When we were in the basement, I had plugged that USB drive into his router for 10 seconds before we ran. It was a Hail Mary pass. I installed a keylogger and a backdoor Trojan. I was hoping he would use his laptop so I could get his passwords, but now I needed something else. If he is keeping her in the library panic room, he needs to watch her. That room doesn't have windows, I typed furiously. I accessed the smart home system. Julian had upgraded everything to the latest tech, cameras in every room. I cycled through the feeds, living room, kitchen, garage, all empty. Then I found a hidden feed. It wasn't labeled. It was just an IP address. I clicked it. The screen flickered. A black and white image appeared. My heart stopped beating. It was a small room, no windows, just rows of banker's boxes stacked against the wall, and in the corner on a camping cot lay a woman, Layla. She was curled into a ball, shivering violently. She looked emaciated. Her hair was wild. She was wearing the same clothes she had on days ago, stained and torn. "Oh God," Dante whispered, leaning over my shoulder. She is alive," I said, my voice trembling. "But she is in withdrawal. Look at her shaking." Suddenly, the door in the video feed opened. The bookshelf swung outward. Julian walked in. He was holding a glass of water and a small paper cup. I turned up the volume on the feed. The audio was tinny but clear. "Wake up, sleeping beauty," Julian said, kicking the leg of the cot. Layla flinched. She scrambled backward, pressing herself against the wall. Her eyes were wide with terror. "Please," she rasped. Her voice was wrecked. "Please, Patrick, just give it to me. It hurts. My skin feels like it is on fire." "Patrick." She called him Patrick. She knew. She knew who he was. Julian smiled. He rattled the paper cup. "I have your medicine right here, baby. One little pill. It will make all the pain go away. It will make the spiders stop crawling under your skin." He held the cup out. Layla reached for it, her hand shaking like a leaf in a storm. Julian pulled it back. "Not yet. We have a transaction to complete first." He pulled a document out of his jacket pocket. He threw it on the cot. "Sign it." Layla looked at the paper. Tears streamed down her face, washing streaks through the dirt on her cheeks. "I can't," she sobbed. "That is Daddy's company. It is his legacy. He worked 40 years for that. I can't sell it." Julian shrugged. He took a sip of the water. "Your daddy doesn't need a company anymore. He is going to be in a nursing home soon, or jail. Besides, he abandoned you, Layla." He crouched down, getting right in her face. "He left you here. He came to the house, remember? I told him you were sick." "And what did he do? Did he fight for you? Did he break down the door?" "No. He got in his car and drove away. He chose his own safety over you." "Liar," I screamed at the screen. I slammed my fist onto the desk. "Liar." Layla sobbed harder. "He didn't leave me. He loves me." "He forgot you," Julian spat. "He is an old man. He is selfish. I am the only one who takes care of you, Layla. I am the only one who can stop the pain." He held up the pill again. "Now sign the damn paper, or I walk out that door and I don't come back for 2 days. And you can scream in here until your throat bleeds. Nobody will hear you. The walls are 12 inches of concrete. Your father built them that way." The irony was like a knife in my gut. I had built that room to save her. Now it was her torture chamber. Layla looked at the pill. She looked at the paper. She was broken. I could see it in her eyes. The physical pain of the withdrawal was overriding everything else. It was biology. It was torture. "Give me the pen," she whispered. Julian handed her a pen. Layla signed. Her hand shook so bad the signature was barely legible, but it was there. Julian snatched the paper. He checked the signature. He smiled. "Good girl." He tossed the pill onto the dirty cot. Layla scrambled for it like a starving animal. She dry swallowed it instantly. Julian stood up. He adjusted his suit. "I will bring you a sandwich later, if you are good." He walked out. The bookshelf swung shut. The screen went black. I stared at the blank monitor. I felt a coldness spreading through my body that had nothing to do with the temperature of the warehouse. He had won again. He had my company, my fleet of trucks, my contracts, Everything I had built to leave to my grandchildren was now his to liquidate. But as I sat there watching the static, I realized something. He had made a mistake. He got greedy. He forced her to sign under duress, on camera, while holding illegal narcotics. He didn't know I was watching. He didn't know I had the feed. I looked at Dante. The kid was crying. He wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "We have to kill him, Mr. Thorne. We have to go there and kill him." "No, Dante," I said. My voice was eerily calm. "Death is too easy for him. If he dies, he doesn't suffer." I saved the video file. I encrypted it. I sent a copy to 3 different cloud servers. "He took my company," I said, standing up. "He thinks he is rich now. He thinks he is untouchable." I picked up the blueprints. I rolled them up. Tomorrow he is going to try to sell the company assets. He is going to try to cash out and run. We are going to let him start. I walked to the door of the warehouse and looked out at the night sky. I am going to build a trap, Dante. A trap made of paper and laws and concrete. I need you to call Mrs. Peterson at the city planning office. Tell her Marcus Thorne is cashing in his favor. Tell her to bring the red tags. "Red tags?" Dante asked. "Condemnation orders," I said. "Julian wants to sell my assets. Let's see him try to sell a building that has just been declared a biological hazard zone. And while he is distracted fighting the city," I looked back at the computer where the file was saving. "We are going to break into the library. Layla signed away my company tonight, but she didn't sign away her father. I am coming for you, baby girl, and I am bringing the sledgehammer." I woke up to the sound of rain drumming against the corrugated metal roof of the warehouse in Queens. My neck was stiff and my joints felt like they were filled with broken glass. I am 72 years old. I should be waking up in a memory foam bed with the smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen. Instead, I was waking up in a freezing storage shed smelling of motor oil and old dust. But strangely, I felt better than I had in years. The fear was gone. The confusion was gone. What was left was the cold, hard clarity of a man who has inspected the blueprints and found the structural flaw. I looked over at Dante. He was sleeping in the driver's seat of his truck with his mouth open. Good kid. He stayed. He didn't have to, but he did. I poured myself a cup of cold coffee from the thermos and looked at the list of names I had written on a piece of scrap paper. Julian or Patrick or whatever he wanted to call himself thought he was smart because he knew how to manipulate the system. He knew how to forge a signature. He knew how to bribe a doctor. He knew how to charm a police sergeant. But he made a classic mistake. He thought the system was just the police and the courts. He forgot about the other system, the invisible system that actually makes the world run, the system of permits and codes and zoning laws, the system of favors traded in quiet offices over the last 40 years. He was playing checkers with the cops. I was about to play chess with the bureaucracy. I picked up my burner phone. I didn't dial 911. 911 is for emergencies. This wasn't an emergency anymore. This was a demolition project. I dialed a number I hadn't called in 5 years. Martha Peterson, the director of city planning. 20 years ago, Martha was a junior architect who made a mistake on a load-bearing calculation for a school gymnasium. It was a bad mistake. If I had reported it officially, she would lost her license. Her career would have been over. But I saw that she was young and tired and overworked. I saw that she was a single mother trying to survive, so I didn't report it. I called her. I met her at the site. I showed her the error and I watched her fix it with her own hands. I saved her career, and I never asked for anything in return. Until today. The phone rang 4 times. City Planning Director's office. "Hello, Martha," I said. "It is Marcus Thorne." There was a silence on the other end. A long pause. Then a voice that was warm but cautious. "Marcus, my God, I haven't heard your voice since your retirement party. How are you? I am in trouble, Martha, and I need to cash in the chip." I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I told her exactly what I needed. I didn't tell her about the kidnapping or the drugs. That would sound crazy. That would make her hesitate. I told her something she could understand, something she could act on legally. I told her there was illegal construction at my property. I told her there were unpermitted excavations that threatened the structural integrity of the neighborhood. I told her there was a gas leak risk from unauthorized HVAC modifications. And I told her I was the owner on record and I was being denied access to inspect it. "Martha," I said, my voice low and serious, "I need a stop work order, and I need a red tag. Immediate condemnation for safety hazards. I need a full inspection team with police escort to vacate the premises. Today." She hesitated. "Marcus, you know I can't just issue a red tag without a preliminary survey. The protocol is—" "Screw the protocol, Martha," I interrupted. "I saved that school gym, remember? I saved those kids from a roof collapse and I saved you from a lawsuit. Now I am telling you my house is about to collapse. There is a man in there who is destroying the foundation. I need you to get him out." I heard her typing. I heard the click of her mouse. "Okay, Marcus. For you. I will sign the emergency order, hazard to public safety, potential gas line rupture. We can have a team there by noon. Thank you, Martha. Bring the bolt cutters." I hung up. Step 1 complete, the physical attack. Now for step 2, the financial attack. I dialed the number for Saul Davis. Saul is 80 years old. He has been a trust and estate lawyer since the Nixon administration. He is expensive, he is mean, and he hates fraud more than he hates taxes. He handled the original paperwork for the Thorne family trust. He answered on the second ring. His voice sounded like gravel in a cement mixer. "Davis here. Saul, it is Marcus. Marcus Thorne. I thought you were dead, or in Florida, which is the same thing. I am not dead, Saul, but someone is trying to bury me." I explained the situation. I told him about the power of attorney. I told him about the depleted bank accounts. I told him about the offshore transfers. Saul listened without interrupting. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. "Sloppy," he grunted. "This guy is sloppy. He got a power of attorney based on medical incapacity, right?" "Yes," I said. "A letter from a Dr. Eris Thorne." "Never heard of him," Saul said. "Listen, Marcus, this is textbook. He is counting on you being too confused to fight back. He is using the POA to shield himself from theft charges. If you go to the cops, they will say it is a civil matter because he has the document." "Exactly," I said. "That is why I called you. We need to file an emergency injunction," Saul said. "We need to freeze the assets. But more importantly, we need to revoke that power of attorney. I need you to see a real Dr. Marcus, a court-appointed psychiatrist. I need a certificate of sanity dated today. Can you do that?" I looked at Dante. I looked at the clear, sharp lines of the blueprints on the desk. "I am saner than I have ever been, Saul." "Good. Get the eval. I will file the papers. We are going to hit him with a forensic audit that will make his head spin. We aren't going to sue him for kidnapping Marcus. That is too hard to prove if he moved the girl. We are going to sue him for fiduciary fraud. We are going to hit him for breach of trust. We are going to freeze every account he has, including the ones in the Caymans. We will starve him out." "Do it," I said. I hung up the phone. I looked at Dante. The kid was staring at me with wide eyes. "You didn't call the cops," he said. "No, Dante," I said, pouring another cup of coffee. "If I call the cops, Julian spins a story. He shows them the fake medical records. He plays the concerned husband. The cops are trained to de-escalate. They are trained to believe the person with the paperwork." I took a sip of the bitter coffee. "But city planning, they don't care about stories. They care about permits. If a wall is built without a permit, it comes down. It doesn't matter if the Pope lives there." And Saul Davis. He doesn't care about feelings. He cares about the money trail. I walked over to the workbench and rolled up the blueprints. "We are going to squeeze him, Dante. We are going to cut off his money. We are going to condemn the roof over his head. We are going to strip him naked in the middle of the street. And when he is panicked, when he is running around trying to save his stolen fortune, that is when he will make a mistake. That is when he will lead us to Layla." I checked my watch. It was 9 a.m. Martha's team would be there at noon. We had 3 hours to get ready. I put on my old inspector's jacket. It still had the city patch on the shoulder. It smelled of drywall dust and rain. "Let's go, Dante," I said. "I want to be there when they put the padlock on the door." We drove back to Long Island. We parked down the street again. At 11:55, a convoy arrived. It was beautiful. 2 city vans with orange lights flashing, a police cruiser for escort, and Martha Peterson stepping out of her sedan wearing a hard hat and holding a clipboard that looked like a judgment from God. I watched from the truck. They marched up the driveway. Martha didn't knock. She pounded on the door. I saw Julian open it. I saw the shock on his face. He was wearing his suit, probably getting ready to go to the bank to sell my company. He started talking, waving his hands. I could see him using his charm, using his lies. But Martha didn't listen. She pointed at the clipboard. She pointed at the officer. Then she pointed at the front door. She slapped a bright orange sticker on the wood. The red tag, condemned, unsafe structure, do not enter. Julian looked like he had been slapped. He tried to rip it off. The officer stepped forward and grabbed his wrist. "You can't do this," Julian screamed. I could hear him from down the street. "This is my house." "Not anymore, son," I whispered from the truck. "Now it is a crime scene." Martha said something to him. He turned pale. He ran back inside, probably to grab his laptop or his cash. He came out 2 minutes later with a bag. The police escorted him off the property. They put yellow tape across the driveway. Julian stood on the sidewalk. He looked small. He looked furious. He pulled out his phone and started dialing frantically. He was calling his lawyer, but his lawyer wouldn't be able to help him because right now Saul Davis was walking into a courthouse filing an emergency freeze on all his assets. His credit cards would stop working in about an hour. His bank accounts would be locked. He was homeless. He was broke. And he was being watched. I turned to Dante. Now we wait. He has nowhere to go. He can't go to the motel because he doesn't have money to pay for the room. He can't go to the bank. He will go to the one place he thinks is safe. He will go to wherever he hid the cash, or he will go to Layla to try and force her to sign more papers so he can get quick money from a loan shark. Julian got into his BMW. He slammed the door. He peeled out, leaving tire marks on the pavement. "Follow him, Dante," I said. "And stay close. He is desperate now. And a desperate rat always runs back to its hole." We followed him onto the highway. He was driving erratically, speeding up, slowing down. He was checking his mirrors. "He knows something is wrong," I said. "But he doesn't know it is me. He thinks it is the city. He thinks it is bad luck." He took the exit for the industrial district, the same exit for the motel. But he didn't go to the motel. He drove past it. He drove past the warehouses. He turned onto a dirt road that led toward the old shipyard. The shipyard. My heart went cold. I had worked at that shipyard in the 70s. It was abandoned now. Just rusting hulls and empty shipping containers. "Why is he going there?" Dante asked. "Because it is quiet," I said, "and because nobody asks questions at the docks." He pulled up to a blue shipping container sitting by itself near the water's edge. He jumped out of the car. He didn't look around. He ran to the container. He fumbled with a set of keys. He unlocked the heavy doors and swung them open. I saw him disappear inside. I didn't wait. "Drive, Dante," I shouted. "Drive right up to the doors. Block him in." Dante slammed on the gas. The truck roared. We flew across the gravel lot, kicking up dust. We screeched to a halt inches from the open doors of the container. I jumped out. I didn't have a weapon. I had a tire iron I had grabbed from under the seat. I ran to the opening. Julian was inside. And there she was. Layla was tied to a chair in the back of the container. She was conscious, but barely. There was an IV drip stand next to her. Julian spun around. He saw me. And this time, he didn't smile. He screamed. "You are supposed to be gone." I stepped into the container. The metal floor rang under my boots. "I am not gone, Patrick," I said, raising the tire iron. "And neither is this house." I looked at Layla. "I am here, baby. Daddy is home." Julian reached into his jacket. He pulled out a gun, a small silver pistol. "You old fool," he hissed, aiming at my chest. "You should have stayed in Florida." I didn't stop walking. "Shoot me then," I said. "Go ahead. Add murder to the list. You are already going down for fraud and kidnapping. Why not go for life without parole?" He hesitated. His hand shook. He was a con man, not a killer, not up close. He liked to kill slowly with drugs and lies. He didn't have the stomach for blood. That hesitation was all I needed. I didn't swing the tire iron at him. I threw it. It spun through the air and smashed into his hand. The gun flew. He screamed, clutching his broken fingers. I was on him in a second. I am 72 years old, but I have 40 years of rage stored up in these hands. I tackled him. We hit the metal floor hard. He punched me. I didn't feel it. I grabbed his collar. "Where is the antidote?" I roared. "What did you give her?" He spat in my face. I punched him. Once, twice. Dante ran in. He grabbed the gun from the floor. "Mr. Thorne, stop. You are going to kill him." I held my fist up, shaking. Julian was bleeding from the nose. He looked terrified. He looked like the child he really was. I stood up. I straightened my jacket. "Tie him up, Dante," I said. "Use his own expensive silk tie." I ran to Layla. I ripped the tape off her mouth. I untied her hands. "Daddy," she whispered. "Is it real? Are you real?" "I am real, baby," I said, hugging her. I felt her ribs. She was so thin. "I am real. And we are going home. Not the house I thought. The house was contaminated. But we were going to a new home. A home without secrets. I looked back at Julian. Dante had him hog-tied on the floor. "You lost, Patrick," I said. "You didn't lose because I was stronger. You lost because you didn't check the foundation. You built your lies on sand, and I am the storm." I took out my phone. The real one. Now I dialed 911. Now it was an emergency, but not for me, for him. Julian thought he had buried me. He thought he had erased Marcus Thorne from the equation. But what he didn't know was that while he was playing checkers, I was playing demolition. The freeze on his bank accounts, which my lawyer Saul Davis had executed with the precision of a sniper, had hit him hard. I knew it the moment I saw him at the ATM machine down the street from the house. Dante and I were watching from the truck parked behind a newspaper stand. Julian put his card in. He punched in his PIN. He waited. And then he slammed his fist against the machine. He was cut off. The millions he had siphoned from my trust fund, the equity he had stolen from my house, it was all sitting in a digital vault that he couldn't touch. He was a millionaire on paper, but in reality he couldn't even buy a gallon of gas. Panic makes people do stupid things. And Patrick O'Connell, or Julian, or whatever he called himself, was panicking. He needed cash, and he needed it now. He needed enough to buy a fake passport and a plane ticket to a country without an extradition treaty. And he had only one asset left to sell: the house. My house. It was Wednesday morning when the for sale sign didn't go up. Instead, a catering truck pulled into the driveway. Then a cleaning crew. Then a staging company carrying modern furniture that looked like it belonged in a dentist's office, not a family home. He wasn't listing it on the market. That would take too long. He was doing a pocket listing, a private auction, cash buyers only. Investors who didn't ask questions about permits or inspections. He was going to sell my legacy to the highest bidder by midnight and be on a plane by dawn. I sat in the warehouse in Queens, watching the video feed from the hidden camera in the library. Julian was pacing. He was on the phone. Yes, 2.5 million. Cash. As is. No, I can't do an inspection today. My wife is indisposed. We are moving to Europe for her health. We need to close tonight. He was desperate. He was selling a $3 million home for a discount just to get the liquid cash. And Layla. I looked at the screen. The bookshelf was closed. But I knew she was behind it. He hadn't moved her. He couldn't move her. If he tried to drag her out now with the caterers and the stagers swarming the house, he would be seen. So he was keeping her walled up like a secret in a tomb while he sold the tomb around her. He plans to sell the house with her inside it, I whispered. My blood ran cold. He is going to hand the keys to some stranger and leave her to rot in that panic room. Dante looked at me, his face pale. "Mr. Thorne, we have to stop him. We have to call the police now." "No," I said. My voice was steady, but my heart was burning. "If we call the police now, he spins a story. He says the house is his. He says I am harassing him. He might even have time to slip out the back and disappear, and if he disappears, we might never find the code to that panic room door." I stood up and put on my jacket. "He wants a party, Dante. He wants a show. He wants to stand in my living room and drink champagne and brag about his renovation. Fine. I will give him a show." I picked up the burner phone. I dialed Martha Peterson at the city planning office. "Martha," I said, "is the team ready?" "We are ready, Marcus. The paperwork is signed. Immediate condemnation order, structural failure, biohazard. We have the police escort on standby." "Good," I said. "Don't come yet. Wait until 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock. "That is overtime, Marcus. Wait until the party is full, Martha. Wait until every potential buyer is holding a glass of wine. Wait until he thinks he has sold it. I want witnesses. I want him to be humiliated in front of the very people he is trying to impress. You are a cruel man, Marcus." "No, Martha. I am a just man." I hung up. We spent the afternoon preparing. I wasn't going back to that house as a confused old man. I was going back as the inspector. I went to my locker in the warehouse. I pulled out my old city uniform, the blue windbreaker with the building department seal on the chest, the hard hat, the clipboard, and the heavy steel-toed boots. I put them on. The jacket was a little tight around the shoulders, but it fit. It felt like armor. Dante watched me. He didn't say anything. He just went to his toolbox and grabbed the biggest pair of bolt cutters he had. "I am coming with you," he said. "You are damn right you are," I said. "You are my deputy today." We drove to Long Island as the sun began to set. The sky was a bruised purple, just like the color of my daughter's skin in that video feed. We parked down the street. The house was lit up like a Christmas tree. Music was drifting out of the open windows. Jazz. Smooth, sophisticated jazz masking the horror that was happening behind the walls. Luxury cars lined the street. Bentleys, Porsches. The vultures had arrived. These weren't families looking for a home. These were speculators looking for a quick flip. They were laughing, drinking champagne, walking on the lawn I had mowed for 30 years. I watched through binoculars. I saw Julian. He was standing on the porch holding a crystal glass. He was wearing a new tuxedo. He looked charming. He was shaking hands, smiling, pointing out the architectural details. And here we have the original brickwork, I could imagine him saying. Refurbished by yours truly. You didn't refurbish it, you parasite, I muttered. You just painted over the cracks. The clock on the dashboard ticked closer to 8. At 7:45, a black sedan pulled up. A man got out. He was carrying a briefcase. That is the buyer, Dante whispered. I zoomed in. He looked like a shark, slicked back hair, expensive suit. He walked up to Julian. They shook hands. Julian pointed to the library window. They are going to sign, I said. Not on my watch. I saw headlights in the rearview mirror. One van, two vans, a police cruiser. Martha had arrived. I stepped out of the truck. I adjusted my hard hat. I grabbed my flashlight. It is time, Dante, I said. We walked up the street. The city planning vans rolled slowly behind us like tanks entering a battlefield. The orange lights on their roofs flashed silently, painting the neighborhood in strokes of warning. We reached the driveway. The valet parker tried to stop us. Excuse me, sir, this is a private event. I didn't stop. I walked right past him. It is a crime scene, son, I said. Move your car unless you want it towed. I walked up the path. The gravel crunched under my boots. The music got louder. The laughter got louder. I could see Julian through the big bay window. He was in the living room now, standing by the fireplace. The buyer had the briefcase open on the coffee table. Stacks of cash. Julian was reaching for a pen. He was smiling. The smile of a man who thinks he has gotten away with murder. I walked up the steps to the front door. It was open. I stepped into the foyer. The chatter stopped. A woman in a red dress dropped her glass. It shattered on the marble floor. Julian looked up. His smile froze. It didn't fade. It just solidified into a mask of terror. He saw the uniform. He saw the hard hat. He saw the cold, dead look in my eyes. And behind me, he saw Martha Peterson flanked by 4 inspectors and 2 police officers. Marcus Julian stammered. His voice was high and tight. What is this? You are trespassing. I didn't say a word. I walked into the center of the room. The guests parted like the Red Sea. They looked at my dirty boots. They looked at the official badge on my chest. I stopped in front of the coffee table. I looked at the money. I looked at the buyer. You might want to put that away, I said to the buyer. Unless you want to buy a pile of condemned rubble. The buyer snapped the briefcase shut and took a step back. Julian rushed forward. This is ridiculous, he screamed. This man is senile. He is my father-in-law. He has dementia. Officers, get him out of here. I turned to Julian. I pulled a piece of paper from my clipboard. It was bright orange. I am not your father-in-law tonight, Patrick, I said. My voice boomed through the silent room. I am the city of New York, and I am here to shut you down. I slapped the red tag onto the expensive mirror above the fireplace. The glass cracked under the force of my hand. Condemned. The word seemed to hang in the air. Julian stared at it. You can't do this, he whispered. I turned to Martha. Director, I said formally, I have reason to believe there are unpermitted structural modifications in this residence that pose an immediate threat to life. Specifically, a sealed room without ventilation located behind the north wall of the library. Julian's face went white. He knew. He knew that I knew. And he knew that the game was over. Inspection team, I shouted. Clear the building. Everyone out. Now. The officer stepped forward. The guests started to run. The music stopped. Julian stood there alone in the middle of his ruined party. He looked at me with pure hatred. You ruined everything, he hissed. I stepped closer to him. I leaned in so only he could hear. I am just getting started, Patrick. I pointed to the library. Tear down that wall, I ordered the team. Julian lunged at me. No, you can't. It is load-bearing. The police officer grabbed him. Let him go! Julian screamed, kicking and thrashing. You don't understand. She is... He stopped. He couldn't say it. If he said she was in there, he admitted to the kidnapping. If he said nothing, we would find her anyway. He was trapped. I looked at him. She is what, Patrick? I asked quietly. He slumped in the officer's grip, defeated. I turned my back on him. I walked toward the library. Dante was already there, holding the sledgehammer. Do it, kid, I said. Dante swung. The wood splintered. The drywall crumbled. And from the darkness of the panic room, a scream echoed out. It wasn't a scream of fear. It was a scream of hope. Daddy. I dropped my clipboard. I ran. The party was over. The nightmare was ending. And the reckoning had begun. I stood in the shadows of the old oak tree I had planted 30 years ago and watched the circus through the bay window. Julian was center stage, holding a crystal flute of champagne like a scepter. He was standing on this patio I had poured with my own sweat mixed into the aggregate, but tonight he looked like a king surveying a kingdom he had conquered without fighting a single battle. The house was lit up like a beacon in the night. Soft jazz music drifted out through the open French doors, mixing with the polite laughter of people who had more money than morals. These weren't families looking for a place to raise children. I knew their type. I had dealt with them for 40 years in the city planning office. They were flippers, speculators, vultures in Italian suits looking for a distressed asset they could tear apart and resell for a profit. And Julian was feeding them exactly what they wanted. I could see him gesturing broadly, pointing at the crown molding, pointing at the marble fireplace. He was selling my life's work piece by piece. Next to me, Dante shifted his weight. He was holding the heavy bolt cutters and breathing hard. Are you ready, Mr. Thorne? He whispered. I adjusted the hard hat on my head. It felt tight. It had been 5 years since I wore it, but the weight was familiar. It was grounding. I looked down at my chest, at the City of New York Building Department badge pinned to my windbreaker. It was scratched and faded, but it still carried the weight of the law. I am ready, Dante, I said. Let's go crash a party. I signaled to Martha Peterson. She was waiting in the lead van 2 houses down. Her headlights flashed once. Then the convoy began to move. 2 white city vans with orange strobe lights cutting through the darkness, followed by a police cruiser with its blue and red lights silent but spinning. We marched up the driveway. The gravel crunched under my steel-toed boots. It was a rhythm I knew well, the sound of authority arriving to set things right. A young man in a red vest stepped out from the valet stand. He looked terrified as he saw the wall of vehicles approaching. Excuse me, sir, he stammered, holding up a hand. This is a private event. You can't park here. I didn't stop walking. I didn't even slow down. I walked right past him, my eyes locked on the front door. Move your car, son, I said, my voice low and hard. Unless you want it crushed. This is an active crime scene. He scrambled out of the way, dropping a set of keys in the gravel. I walked up the steps to the front porch. The door was wide open, welcoming the cool night air. I stepped across the threshold. The foyer was crowded. Women in cocktail dresses holding canapes, men in tuxedos discussing interest rates. The smell of expensive perfume and roasted lamb filled the air. It was sickening. It was the smell of greed. I walked into the center of the room. My heavy boots made a loud thud on the marble floor. Thud, thud, thud. The conversation nearest to me died out. Heads turned. People frowned. They looked at my dirty boots, my faded blue windbreaker, my hard hat. They looked at me like I was a cockroach that had crawled out of the drain. Who is that? Someone whispered. Is that the gardener? I kept walking until I reached the archway of the living room. Julian was there. He was standing by the fireplace, a pen in his hand, hovering over a stack of documents on the coffee table. Opposite him sat a man with slicked-back hair and a predatory smile, the buyer. There was a briefcase open on the table, revealing neat stacks of $100 bills. Cash. Julian was selling my $3 million legacy for a suitcase of dirty cash. Julian looked up. His smile froze. It didn't fade away slowly. It shattered, instantly replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated terror. He dropped the pen. It rolled across the document, leaving a jagged black ink stain. He saw the uniform. He saw the badge. But most of all, he saw my eyes, and in them he saw the end of his world. Marcus, he stammered. His voice was high-tight, breathless. What? What are you doing here? I didn't answer him. Not yet. I turned to the room. I looked at the 50 guests who were now staring at me in stunned silence. The jazz music was still playing softly in the background, a ridiculous soundtrack to the tension in the room. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a whistle, the kind I used to use on construction sites to signal a blast. I blew it. The sound was piercing. It cut through the air like a knife, silencing the music and making everyone jump. "Ladies and gentlemen," I boomed my voice, projecting from the diaphragm just like I had learned on the loud docks of the shipyard. "This party is over." Julian rushed forward. He tried to block me from the buyer's view. He tried to regain control of the narrative. "Please, everyone, calm down," he shouted, waving his hands frantically. "This is my father-in-law. He is not well. He has dementia. He wanders off. He likes to dress up in his old uniform." He turned to me, his eyes pleading, his voice a hiss of desperation. "Marcus, get out of here. Do not do this. Do. I will call the police." I looked down at him. He looked so small. "You don't need to call them Patrick," I said. "I brought them with me." I stepped aside. Martha Peterson walked in, flanked by 4 uniformed building inspectors and 2 police officers. The sight of the uniforms sent a ripple of panic through the room. Julian's face went white. He looked from me to Martha to the police. He looked like a rat realizing the trap had just snapped shut. I turned back to the crowd. I pulled a bright orange sticker from my clipboard. It was a red tag. The most feared piece of paper in the construction industry. I peeled the backing off. I slapped it onto the large antique mirror hanging above the fireplace right next to Julian's head. Condemned. The words seemed to scream from the glass. I turned to Julian. I spoke loud enough for the buyer to hear, for every guest to hear, for God himself to hear. "Cease all activity immediately," I ordered. "This property is being sealed under Emergency Order 44B. Julian was shaking. "On what grounds?" he squeaked. "On what grounds, Marcus? This house is perfect. You built it yourself." I leaned in close. "That is exactly why I know what is wrong with it," I said. I turned to the room, raising my voice again. "We have detected unauthorized subterranean construction that has compromised the structural foundation of this residence. Furthermore, we have readings indicating a critical toxic gas leak originating from an unpermitted ventilation system in the north wing." I paused, letting the words sink in. Toxic gas. Structural failure. The room erupted. The calm facade of the wealthy elite crumbled instantly. People started shouting. Women grabbed their purses. The buyer with the briefcase snapped it shut so fast it sounded like a gunshot. "This building is a biological hazard zone," I continued. "Everyone needs to evacuate immediately. Move. Now. Or you will be arrested for violating a city safety order." The stampede began. It wasn't dignified. The people who had been sipping champagne a minute ago were now shoving each other to get to the door. Wine glasses were dropped, shattering on the floor. Chairs were knocked over. Julian stood in the middle of the chaos, screaming, "No, stop, don't leave, it is a lie, there is no gas, he is crazy, come back, my money, come back." He grabbed the buyer's arm. "Please, we can sign outside, I will knock off another 100,000. The buyer shoved Julian away hard. "Get off me, you lunatic," the buyer shouted. "You tried to sell me a condemned building. You are lucky I don't break your legs." The buyer ran out the door, clutching his briefcase. In 2 minutes, the room was empty. The silence returned, but it was different now. It wasn't the silence of a party. It was the silence of a reckoning. Only Julian remained. He stood by the fireplace, panting, his hair wild, his tie crooked. He looked at the red tag on the mirror. Then he looked at me. "You did this," he whispered. His eyes were full of tears, not of sorrow, but of rage. "You destroyed everything. I was so close. I was going to be free." I walked toward him slowly. Martha and the officers stayed back, blocking the exits. "You were never going to be free, Patrick," I said, "because you built your freedom on a foundation of lies, and lies always crack." Julian laughed, a manic, broken sound. "You think you won," he spat. "You think because you chased away the buyers you won. But you still don't have her, do you, Marcus? You don't know where she is." He backed away toward the hallway. "I can still disappear. I know this house better than you think. There are tunnels. There are ways out. And when I go, she stays. And nobody will ever find her." I stopped. I looked at him with pity. "You really think I don't know where she is?" I asked quietly. Julian froze. I pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen. I held it up so he could see. It was the live feed from the library. His face crumbled. "I saw you give her the pill, Patrick," I said. "I saw you force her to sign. I saw you leave her in the dark." Julian looked at the library door. It was closed. He looked at the officers. He realized then that there were no tunnels that could save him. There were no lies that could cover this. He lunged. He didn't lunge at me. He lunged at the fireplace poker. He grabbed the heavy iron rod and swung it wildly. "Stay back!" he screamed, backing toward the library. "If anyone comes near me, I will kill her. I swear to God I will open that room and kill her before you can stop me." The officers drew their weapons. "Drop it!" "No," Julian screamed. "I am walking out of here, and I am taking her with me as a hostage. She is my wife. She belongs to me." I looked at Dante, who was standing by the library door holding the sledgehammer. Julian didn't see him. He was too focused on the police. I took a step forward. "She doesn't belong to you," I said. "She is a thorn, and this is a thorn house." Julian swung the poker at me. "Back off, old man." I didn't back off. I walked right into his swing. The poker hit my shoulder. I heard a crack. Pain exploded in my arm. But I didn't stop. I didn't fall. Adrenaline is a powerful anesthetic. I grabbed the poker with my good hand. I yanked it from his grip. I grabbed him by the throat. I slammed him against the wall right next to the red tag. "You hurt my house," I growled. "You hurt my name. But you made the mistake of hurting my daughter." I squeezed. I watched his eyes bulge. I watched the air leave his lungs. "Mr. Thorne." It was Martha. Her voice was calm. "Don't kill him, Marcus. He isn't worth it. Let us handle the rest." I looked at Julian. I looked at the pathetic creature squirming in my grip. She was right. He wasn't worth the stain on my soul. I let him go. He slid to the floor, gasping for air. The officers were on him in a second. Handcuffs clicked. I turned my back on him. I looked at the library door. "Dante," I said, clutching my throbbing shoulder. "Tear it down." Dante swung the sledgehammer. The sound of wood splintering was the most beautiful music I had ever heard. Julian screamed from the floor, "No, no!" But it was too late. The wall crumbled. The false bookcase fell forward with a crash. And there, in the dusty gloom of the panic room, sat my daughter. She looked up, blinking in the sudden light. She saw the uniform. She saw the hard hat. "Daddy," she whispered. I walked into the room. I picked her up. She was light. Too light. I carried her out past the police, past the weeping con man on the floor, past the ruined party. I carried her out into the cool night air where the orange lights of the city vans were flashing like a heartbeat. "We are safe, baby," I whispered into her hair. "The inspection is over, and the vermin have been cleared." The last luxury sedan peeled out of the driveway, leaving tire marks on the asphalt and a cloud of exhaust that smelled like fear. The party was over. The potential buyers, the investors, the sharks in Italian suits, they had all fled the moment I slapped that red condemnation sticker on the mirror. They didn't care about the truth. They didn't care about justice. They only cared about liability. And nobody wants to buy a lawsuit. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the silence of a battlefield after the cannons stopped firing. The jazz music had been cut. The only sound was the heavy breathing of Julian standing in the middle of the ruined living room and the crackle of the police radios from the officers standing by the door. Julian looked around at the empty room. His face was a mask of disbelief. He looked at the abandoned champagne glasses. He looked at the briefcase full of cash that the buyer had snatched back before running out the door. Then he looked at me. His eyes were not the eyes of a son. They were the eyes of a cornered animal, a rat that realizes the trap has snapped shut and there is no cheese left to steal. "You crazy old man," he screamed. His voice broke. It was a raw, ugly sound. "You ruined me. Do you have any idea what you just did? That was a cash offer, $2.5 million. It was done. It was signed. And you walked in here with your costume and your fake badge and you set fire to it." He lunged toward me. Officer Miller stepped forward, his hand resting on his holster. Julian stopped. He was shaking. His hands were balled into fists at his sides. "You are insane, Marcus," he hissed, spitting the words at me. "You are a senile, paranoid old fool. There is no gas leak. There is no structural failure. You made it all up because you hate me, because you can't stand that I am the one in charge now. I am going to sue you. I am going to sue the city. I will have your pension. I will have this badge ripped off your chest." I didn't flinch. I stood my ground, my steel-toed boots planted firmly on the marble floor I had laid 30 years ago. I looked at him, I looked past the tuxedo and the expensive watch, I looked right into the black hole where his soul should be. "You are right, Patrick," I said calmly, using his real name. "There is no gas leak." Julian blinked. He looked confused. "But there is a structural failure," I continued, "and it is right behind you." I pointed past him, toward the library. Julian froze. He didn't turn around. He knew what was there. He knew what was behind the wall of leather-bound books he never read. I walked past him. I signaled to Dante and the team of city inspectors. "Bring the sledges," I ordered. Julian scrambled in front of the library doors. He threw his arms out, blocking the way. "No, you can't go in there. It is private property. This is harassment. Officer, arrest him. He is destroying my home." I stopped inches from his face. "It is not your home," I said. "It is a crime scene. And under City Ordinance 44 Section B, when a structural anomaly threatens human life, I don't need a warrant. I just need a hammer." I pushed past him. He tried to grab my arm, but Dante stepped in. Dante is young and strong, and he has spent years hauling mulch and stone. He shoved Julian back with one hand, sending him stumbling into a side table. We walked into the library. It smelled of old paper and dust. It was the room I was most proud of. I had built the shelves from solid mahogany. I had installed the rolling ladder. I had designed it to be a sanctuary, a place of peace. And in the corner behind the section on European history, I had built the panic room. I stood before the bookcase. I knew the trick. I knew that if you pulled the copy of The Count of Monte Cristo, the latch would click and the shelf would swing open. I had built it that way so my family could hide if we were ever attacked. But I wasn't going to use the latch. I wasn't going to play his game. This room had been desecrated. It wasn't a sanctuary anymore. It was a prison. And you don't open a prison with a secret handshake. You tear it down. I nodded to Dante. "Center mass," I said, pointing to the middle of the shelf. "Don't hold back, son," Julian screamed from the hallway. "Stop, stop it. You are destroying a load-bearing wall. The roof will collapse." Dante didn't listen. He lifted the 20-pound sledgehammer. The muscles in his arms bunched. He swung. Crack. The sound was like a gunshot. Wood splintered. Books flew off the shelves, fluttering to the floor like dying birds. The mahogany cracked down the middle. Again I ordered. Dante swung again. Crash! The drywall behind the wood crumbled. Dust billowed out into the room, a white cloud of gypsum and plaster. Julian was sobbing now. He was on his knees, held back by the police officer. "Please," he begged. "Please don't." "One more time, Dante," I said. "Break it open." Dante swung with everything he had. The entire section of the bookcase gave way. It collapsed inward, falling into the darkness of the hidden room with a deafening roar. Silence followed. The dust hung in the air, glowing in the beam of the flashlights. I stepped forward. I climbed over the broken wood and the torn books. I stepped through the hole in the wall. I shone my flashlight into the gloom. The air inside was stale. It smelled of sweat. It smelled of unwashed clothes. It smelled of fear. And there in the corner, sitting on a dirty camping cot, was my daughter, Layla. She didn't move. She was curled into a tight ball, her knees pulled up to her chest, her face buried in her arms. She was wearing a t-shirt that was 3 sizes too big and covered in stains. Her hair was matted, a tangled mess that hadn't seen a brush in weeks. But it was the sound that broke me, a low whimpering sound, like a wounded animal that has given up hope. "Layla," I whispered. She flinched. She pressed herself harder against the concrete wall as if she could melt into it. "No," she moaned. Her voice was a rasp. "No more pills. Please, Patrick, no more pills." I signed the paper. I signed it, "Leave me alone." I felt a tear, hot and angry, slide down my cheek. I dropped my flashlight. I fell to my knees beside the cot. "It isn't Patrick, baby. It is Daddy." I reached out to touch her shoulder. She recoiled, screaming. A sharp, terrified scream that echoed off the concrete walls. "Don't touch me. You aren't real. You aren't real." I saw something glinting in the light. My eyes followed her leg down to the floor. An ankle shackle. A heavy steel cuff was clamped around her thin ankle. A chain ran from the cuff to a bolt drilled into the concrete floor. He had chained her. He had chained my daughter like a dog in the house I built to protect her. I felt a rage so pure, so white-hot that I thought my heart would stop. I wanted to turn around and walk out to the living room and kill him. I wanted to end him right there on the marble floor. But I couldn't. Not yet. Layla needed me. I grabbed the bolt cutters from Dante's hand. "Hold her leg, son," I said, my voice trembling. "Hold her still." Dante moved forward, tears streaming down his face. He gently held Layla's ankle. "It is okay, Miss Layla," he whispered. "It is Dante. We are cutting you loose." I fit the jaws of the bolt cutters around the chain. I squeezed. My old muscles screamed. My arthritis flared. But I didn't feel it. I put 40 years of love and anger into that grip. Snap. The chain fell away. I scooped her up. She was so light. She felt like a bird made of hollow bones. She was shivering violently, her teeth chattering. "I am got you," I said, rocking her. "I got you." I stood up, carrying her in my arms. I climbed back out through the broken wall. I walked into the living room. The police officers gasped. Martha Peterson covered her mouth with her hand. Julian was still on the floor. He looked up. He saw Layla in my arms. He saw the broken chain dangling from her ankle. And for a second, I saw the truth in his eyes. He knew it was over. But then the sociopath took over. The con man flipped the switch. He scrambled to his feet, his face twisting into a mask of frantic denial. "Oh my God," he shouted, pointing at her. "Look at her. Look what she did." He turned to the police officers, his hands shaking. "I told you she was sick. I told you she was crazy. She locked herself in there. She stole the key. She thinks she is doing penance. She thinks she has to punish herself for losing the baby." He took a step toward us. "Give her to me, Marcus. She needs her medication. She is delusional. She chained herself up. I have been trying to get her out for days, but she wouldn't let me." I stared at him. I held my daughter tighter against my chest. "She chained herself?" I asked, my voice quiet, dangerously quiet. "Yes," Julian screamed. "She is paranoid. She thinks people are coming to get her. That is why I had to sell the house, to get her to a clinic in Switzerland. I was trying to save her." He looked at the officers, his eyes wide and innocent. "You have to believe me. Why would I chain my own wife? I love her. This is all a misunderstanding. This old man broke into my house and terrified her. That is why she is shaking. He was good. I had to give him that. He was standing in front of a starving woman with chain marks on her leg, and he was selling the lie with the conviction of a preacher. But he forgot one thing." Layla raised her head. She looked at him. Her eyes were sunken dark circles, bruising the skin beneath them. But the fog of the drugs was lifting just enough. She saw him, and she spoke. "Liar." It was a whisper, but in the silence of the room it sounded like a scream. You made me sign," she rasped. "You said, if I didn't sign, you would never let me out." She lifted a trembling hand and pointed at him. "You liked it," she whispered. "You liked hearing me cry." Julian's face fell. The mask shattered. He snarled, a vicious, ugly sound. "Shut up, you junkie bitch," he screamed, lunging at her. "Shut your mouth." The police officers didn't hesitate. They tackled him. Julian hit the floor hard. His face smashed into the marble. "Get off me!" he shrieked, kicking and thrashing. "I am Patrick O'Connell. You can't touch me. I have rights." I watched as they cuffed his hands behind his back. I watched as they hauled him up. "You have the right to remain silent," I said, looking him in the eye. "And I suggest you use it, because every word you say from now on is just another nail in your coffin." I turned to Martha. "Is the ambulance here?" I asked. "It is outside, Marcus," she said, wiping her eyes. I carried Layla toward the door. I walked past Julian. I didn't look at him. He was nothing to me now. He was just debris, rubble to be cleared away. I walked out into the cool night air. The paramedics were waiting with a stretcher. I laid her down gently. "Daddy," she whispered, grabbing my hand. "Don't leave me." I kissed her forehead. "I am never leaving you again, baby," I said. I looked back at the house. My house. The windows were dark now. The party was gone. The red condemnation sticker on the mirror was the only decoration left. It was a ruin, but it was standing. And so were we. The handcuffs clicked around Julian's wrists with a sound that was sharper and more satisfying than any gavel I had ever heard strike a block. But even as the metal bit into his skin, he wasn't done. He was a con man to his marrow, and a con man never stops selling the lie until the cell door slams shut. He was on his knees on the dusty floor of the ruined library, his tuxedo torn and covered in gypsum dust, but he lifted his chin with that same arrogant tilt that had fooled my daughter and fooled the bank and almost fooled me. He looked at the police sergeant who was reading him his rights, and he laughed. It was a jagged, hysterical sound that bounced off the broken shelves. You are making a mistake, Sergeant, he said, his voice shaking, not with fear but with indignation. A massive mistake. Do you know who I am? I am the legal guardian of this woman. I hold the power of attorney. He twisted his head to glare at me. This man broke into my home. He destroyed my property. He assaulted me. And you are arresting the victim. The sergeant hesitated. I saw it in his eyes. He looked at Layla shivering in my arms. He looked at the chains on the floor. But then he looked at Julian's expensive suit, and he remembered the doctor's note Julian had probably shown him days ago. The law is a messy thing. It gets confused by paperwork. Julian knew that. He was counting on the fact that technically on paper he was still the master of this house. This is a domestic matter, Julian spat. My wife is mentally unstable. I had to restrain her to prevent self-harm. That is not a crime. It is care. And as for the house, I have the deed. I have the title. You can't arrest a man for what he does in his own basement. I gently handed Layla to Dante. Hold her, son, I whispered. I stepped forward. I wiped the dust from my hands onto my pants. I reached into the inside pocket of my windbreaker. I didn't pull out a weapon. I pulled out a blue folder. It was old. The edges were frayed and the color had faded to a pale slate, but the legal weight inside was as heavy as a wrecking ball. I walked over to where Julian was kneeling. I stood over him, blocking the light. You are right about one thing. Patrick, I said, my voice calm and low. You are a reader. You read the bank statements. You read the trust documents. You read the medical proxy. I opened the folder. But you didn't read the original transfer of occupancy from 1990. Julian scoffed. Transfer of occupancy? What are you talking about, old man? You gave us the house. It was a wedding gift. It is in Layla's name. And since I have power of attorney over Layla, it is in my name. I shook my head slowly. No, Patrick. I never gave away this house. I built this house with my own hands. Every brick, every beam. And a builder never gives away his masterpiece without conditions. I pulled out a yellowed document. I held it up for the sergeant to see. This is a revocable living trust agreement, I explained to the officer. I transferred the title to my daughter, yes. But I retained a life estate interest with a specific restrictive covenant. I looked down at Julian. Do you know what a restrictive covenant is, Patrick? It is a rule that says if you break the rules, you lose the game. I pointed to the shattered wall of the library. I pointed to the hidden room where he had imprisoned my child. Clause 14, Section B, I read aloud. My voice echoed in the silent room. The grantor reserves the right to revoke occupancy immediately and without notice if any structural modification is made to the load-bearing elements of the property without the express written consent of the original architect. I lowered the paper and looked him in the eye. I am the architect, Patrick. Julian's face went pale. The arrogance started to crack. So what? He stammered. So I built a wall. So what? That is a code violation. You give me a fine. You don't arrest me. I smiled. It was a cold smile. It is not just a code violation, I said. Read the rest of the clause. I leaned in closer. Upon violation of this covenant, the right of occupancy is immediately null and void. The status of the occupant reverts retroactively to that of a trespasser. I let that sink in. Retroactively. That means the moment you drilled the first bolt into that concrete floor to chain my daughter up, you were no longer a resident. You were an intruder. You were a stranger breaking into a house you had no right to be in. I turned to the sergeant. Officer, this man is not a legal guardian in his own home. He is a trespasser in my home. And since he has no legal right to be here, the fact that he was holding a woman against her will is not domestic care. I pointed a trembling finger at the chains on the floor. That is kidnapping in the first degree. That is unlawful imprisonment. That is assault. And since he tried to sell a property he no longer had the right to occupy, that is grand larceny and real estate fraud. Julian started to struggle. He thrashed against the handcuffs. No, he screamed. That is a technicality. You can't do this. It is a loophole. It is the law, I roared, silencing him. You tried to use the law to bury me, Patrick. You tried to use paper to steal my life. Well, paper cuts both ways. I turned to Martha Peterson. Director Peterson, I asked, As the city official on site, can you confirm the structural modification? Martha stepped forward. She looked at the hole in the wall. She looked at Julian with disgust. I can confirm, she said firmly. Unauthorized modification of a load-bearing wall. The covenant is triggered. Mr. Thorne is the sole legal authority over this property as of this moment. I looked back at Julian. You are homeless, Patrick. You are broke, and you're going to prison for a very long time. Julian looked at the buyer, who was still standing by the door, clutching his briefcase of cash. Help me, Julian pleaded. Tell them we had a deal. The buyer laughed. He spat on the floor. I don't do business with trespassers, the buyer said, and I definitely don't do business with kidnappers. The buyer turned and walked out. Julian slumped. The fight went out of him. He looked small. He looked like exactly what he was, a parasite that had been ripped away from its host. The sergeant hauled him to his feet. Patrick O'Connell, the sergeant said, his voice hard. You are under arrest for kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, fraud, and trespassing. As they dragged him toward the door, Julian looked back at me. His eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of hatred and fear. I will get out, he hissed. I will get a lawyer. I will fight this. I walked alongside him until we reached the front door. The red condemnation sticker was still on the mirror, reflecting his ruined face. You can try, I said softly. But remember one thing. I tapped the badge on my chest. I inspect foundations for a living, and I made sure yours was rotten before I ever swung the hammer. They pushed him into the back of the cruiser. I watched through the window as he slammed his head against the cage, screaming in silent rage. I stood on the porch and took a deep breath. The air smelled of rain and wet earth. The smell of bleach and chemicals was fading. I turned around. Dante was bringing Layla out. She was walking on her own now, leaning heavily on him, but walking. I walked over to them. I took off my windbreaker and wrapped it around her shoulders. It was dirty and old, but it was warm. Daddy, she whispered. Is he gone? He is gone, baby, I said. He is evicted, permanently. I looked at the house, my masterpiece. It was wrecked. The library was destroyed. The basement was a dungeon. The walls were scarred, but it was still standing. Mr. Thorne, Dante asked, looking at the police cars flashing in the driveway. What do we do now? I looked at my daughter. I looked at the young man who had saved us. Now, I said, putting my arm around Layla. Now we rebuild, but not here. I looked at the red tag on the door. Let the bank have it, I said. Let them bulldoze it. There are too many ghosts in these walls now. I turned my back on the house I had spent 30 years building. It didn't matter anymore. A house is just wood and brick. A home is the people you protect. I have my home right here, I said, holding Layla close. We walked down the driveway, past the gawking neighbors, past the news vans that were starting to arrive. We walked to Dante's beat-up truck. I helped Layla into the middle seat. I got in the passenger side. Take us to the diner, kid, I said. I think we all need a warm meal. As we drove away, I didn't look back. I looked forward. I looked at my daughter's hands. They were scarred and dirty, but they were free. And for the first time in months, I felt my own heartbeat, not with rage, but with peace. The inspection was over. The structure had failed. But the foundation, the real foundation of love and blood that held. And that was the only thing that mattered. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting tight around Julian's wrists was the only music I needed. It was a sharp, mechanical click that cut through the heavy silence of the ruined living room. Julian was on his knees. The knees of his $3,000 tuxedo pants were stained gray with the dust of the drywall Dante had smashed apart. His face was a map of ruin. There was blood from his nose where I had punched him and sweat streaking down his forehead, mixing with the plaster dust. He looked like a statue that had been toppled during a revolution. The two officers hauled him to his feet. He stumbled, his expensive Italian loafers slipping on the debris. He wasn't screaming anymore. The manic energy that had driven him to swing the fireplace poker at me had evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, trembling shell. He looked at the officers, and then he looked at me. His eyes were darting back and forth, searching for an exit, searching for a lie that could save him. "You are making a mistake," he rasped. His voice was raw. "This is unlawful arrest. I demand to see my lawyer. I demand to make a phone call. That man assaulted me. He broke into my house." The sergeant didn't even look at him. He just tightened his grip on Julian's arm. "You have the right to remain silent, sir," the sergeant said in a bored tone. "And frankly, I advise you to use it because you are digging a hole so deep you are going to see China." Julian twisted in their grip. He looked at the buyer who was long gone. He looked at the empty party room. Then his gaze landed on Layla, who was sitting on the steps of the porch wrapped in my jacket with Dante standing guard over her like a loyal watchdog. Layla Julian shouted, Tell them I was taking care of you. Tell them about the baby. Tell them you were sick." Layla didn't look up. She was staring at her hands free of the chains for the first time in days. She didn't hear him. Or maybe she chose not to hear him. He was already becoming a ghost to her. Dante walked over to me. He was holding his phone. His face was grim, but there was a light of victory in his eyes. "Mr. Thorne," he said quietly, "I just got a text from my cousin. He drives a tow truck for the city. He listens to the police scanner." "What is it, Dante?" I asked, watching the officers pat Julian down. "They just raided the Starlight Motel," Dante said. "Room 12. I nodded slowly. The Starlight Motel, where the blonde mistress was waiting for her cut of the house sale. And I asked. "They found her," Dante said. "And they found the stash. She was packing bags to leave. She had 3 kilos of cocaine in a suitcase and a box of pharmaceutical-grade ketamine, the same stuff found in the basement. She tried to flush it, but the cops were too fast. She is in cuffs right now, screaming Julian's name. She is trying to cut a deal, Mr. Thorne. She is singing like a canary." I felt a wave of satisfaction wash over me. It was cold and hard like granite. "Good," I said. Julian heard us. He heard the words Starlight Motel and ketamine. His face went from pale to a sickly shade of gray. He knew what that meant. It meant his escape plan was gone. It meant his money was gone. And it meant he wasn't just facing kidnapping charges. He was facing drug trafficking and distribution. The sergeant pushed Julian toward the door. "Let's go," the sergeant said. "Watch your head." "Wait," I said. My voice was low, but it stopped them. The officers paused. Julian looked at me. There was a flicker of hope in his eyes. Maybe he thought I was going to show mercy. Maybe he thought the old man was going to soften up at the last minute. "I need a moment with him," I said, walking closer. "Just a moment. To say goodbye to my son-in-law." The sergeant nodded. "Make it quick, Mr. Thorne." I stepped right up to him. I was close enough to smell the fear on him. It smelled sour like spoiled milk. I looked into those shark eyes that used to terrify me. They didn't look scary anymore. They looked wet and weak. Julian swallowed hard. "Marcus," he whispered, "please, help me. I can fix this. I have money stashed away, offshore. I can give it to you. All of it. Just tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them I was trying to help her. Please, I don't want to go to jail. You know what they do to guys like me in jail." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had slept in my house, ate at my table, and chained my daughter to a concrete floor. I leaned in close. I wanted this to be intimate. I wanted only him to hear the final nail being driven into his coffin. "You are not going to jail, Julian," I whispered. He blinked. Tears welled up in his eyes. "Thank you, Marcus. Thank you. I knew you were a good man." "No," I cut him off, my voice dropping to a jagged whisper. "You aren't going to jail here. You are going to be extradited." His smile faltered. "Extradited." I brought my lips right to his ear. "I know who you are," I whispered. I felt him stiffen. His whole body went rigid like he had been electrocuted. "I know you aren't Julian Miller," I said. "Julian Miller died in a car accident in Ohio 10 years ago. You just bought his social security number on the dark web." He stopped breathing. I pulled back just an inch so I could see his profile. "Your name is Patrick O'Connell," I said. "And you are from Nevada." He started to shake. Violent, uncontrollable tremors. "I did some reading while I was hiding in that warehouse, Patrick." I continued relentlessly. "I read about the insurance scam in Las Vegas, the warehouse fire, and I read about the security guard who died in that fire, the one they found locked in the break room. I saw the memory hit him. I saw the horror of recognition. That is capital murder, Patrick," I whispered. "First degree. In Nevada, they don't just give you a cell for that. They give you a needle." I paused, letting the weight of the death penalty settle on his shoulders. "There is a warrant out for your arrest, Patrick. It has been cold for 5 years." But I warmed it up. "I sent your photo and your location to the Las Vegas PD this morning. They are already talking to the New York District Attorney." I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of the executioner. "So enjoy the ride downtown, son, because it is the last car ride you will ever take. You aren't going to a minimum security prison for fraud. You are going to death row." I stepped back. Julian looked at me. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His eyes rolled back in his head. He looked like he was having a stroke. The arrogant confidence, the charm, the lies, it was all gone. stripped away by the truth. He sagged in the officer's grip, his legs gave out. He was dead weight. "Get him up," the sergeant grunted, hoisting him by the armpits. Julian started to scream, but it wasn't words. It was just a high-pitched, keening sound of pure terror. "No," he wailed. "No, Nevada, not Nevada. Please. I will confess to the kidnapping. Keep me here. Don't send me back." The officers dragged him out the door. He kicked and thrashed his expensive shoes scraping against the marble floor, leaving black scuff marks on the stone. I followed them to the porch. I watched as they shoved him into the back of the cruiser. He slammed his face against the window, screaming at me, his breath fogging up the glass. "Marcus. Marcus, don't let them take me." I stood on the porch with my hands in my pockets and watched. The blue and red lights painted the neighborhood in a chaotic rhythm. The neighbors were all out on their lawns now in their bathrobes and slippers, holding their phones, filming the downfall of the perfect neighbor. I saw Mrs. Higgins from next door. She looked at me and waved, a tentative, respectful wave. I nodded back. Dante came up beside me. He watched the police car pull away, the siren chirping once as it cleared the intersection. "What did you say to him, Mr. Thorne?" Dante asked. He looked like he saw a ghost. I looked at the empty street where the car had disappeared. "I just told him his horoscope, Dante," I said. "And it turns out his future is very short." I took a deep breath. The night air was cool and clean. The smell of the chemicals from the house was fading, replaced by the scent of the wet grass and the ocean breeze coming off the sound. I turned to look at Layla. She was still sitting on the steps, but she was looking at me now. Her eyes were clear. The fear was still there, but the panic was gone. I walked over to her. I sat down on the cold concrete step beside her. "Is he gone, Daddy?" she asked. "He is gone, baby," I said, wrapping my arm around her shoulders. "And he is never coming back." She leaned her head on my shoulder. She smelled of dust and sickness, but underneath that, she smelled like my daughter. I watched the last of the city vans pull away. The red tag on the door was the only thing left of the night's events. "It is over," I said softly. Layla looked at the house. The windows were dark. It looked like a skull with empty eye sockets. "What about the house?" she asked. I looked at the structure I had poured my life into. I looked at the bricks I had laid. I looked at the roof I had framed. "It is just a building, Layla," I said. "It has rot in the walls. We can't live there anymore." I stood up and helped her to her feet. "We will sell the lot to the bank," I said. "Let them tear it down. Let them build something new. We are going to build something new, too." I looked at Dante. "Bring the truck around, kid," I said. "Let's go get some pancakes." As we walked to the truck, leaving the ruin of my past behind, I felt lighter than I had in 20 years. I didn't have a house anymore. I didn't have my retirement fund. But I had my daughter. I had my dignity. And I had the absolute certainty that I had done the job I was put on this earth to do. I inspected the threat. I identified the fault. And I brought the hammer down. The lights of the ambulance faded into the distance that night, but the real work was just beginning. You don't just walk away from a nightmare like that. You wake up sweating for months. You jump at the sound of a door closing. You check the locks 3 times before you can close your eyes. The first week at the hospital was the longest week of my life. Longer than any double shift I ever pulled at the shipyard. Longer than the nights I spent waiting for concrete to cure in the freezing rain. Layla was alive, but she was fighting a war inside her own body. The withdrawal from the drugs Julian had fed her was brutal. I sat by her bed in the ICU, listening to the machines beep and watching my little girl shake and sweat as the poison left her system. There were nights when she screamed. She screamed for the pills. She screamed for the darkness to stop crushing her. And every time she screamed, I felt a fresh crack in my own heart. But I didn't leave. I held her hand. I wet her forehead with a cool cloth. I sang the old lullabies Beatrice used to sing to her when the thunderstorms rolled in off the Atlantic. The doctors told me she might have permanent nerve damage. They told me the psychological trauma could take years to heal. They looked at me with pity in their eyes. They saw an old man sitting in a plastic chair and they thought I was helpless. They didn't know the Thorne blood. We don't break. We might bend. We might weather. But we do not break. While Layla fought her battle in the hospital, I fought mine in the daylight. I went back to the house. The police had finished their investigation. The crime scene tape was gone, but the scars remained. The front door was battered. The library wall was a pile of rubble. The basement still smelled of that soundproof foam and fear. My lawyer, Saul Davis, told me to sell it. He said, Marcus, take the insurance money and run. Buy a condo in Florida. Forget this place ever existed. I almost did. I had the papers ready. I wanted to burn it down and salt the earth. But then Dante came to me. He walked up the driveway one afternoon while I was staring at the hole in the library wall. He was holding a shovel and a bag of cement. "What are you doing, son?" I asked him. "I am fixing the porch." "Mr. Thorne," he said, "that loose step you told me about. And the railing is rotting. If Miss Layla is coming home, she needs a safe place to walk." I looked at him. I looked at this young man who had risked his life for a family that wasn't his blood, and I realized something. If I sold the house Patrick won, if I sold the house, I was admitting that he had tainted my legacy so badly that it couldn't be saved. I was admitting that the termite had destroyed the beam. No. I picked up a hammer. "We are not just fixing the porch, Dante," I said. "We are fixing everything. We gutted the library. We tore out every inch of that panic room. We ripped up the floorboards where Julian had walked. We poured new concrete in the basement and turned it back into what it was meant to be, a workshop, a place of creation, not captivity. We scrubbed the walls. We painted them a bright, warm yellow, the color of the sun. We planted new hydrangeas to replace the ones that had died from neglect. It took 3 months. My back ached every morning. My hands were covered in calluses again. But every nail I drove felt like I was driving a stake into the heart of the monster who hurt us. 6 months have passed since that night. The summer sun is setting over Long Island, casting long golden shadows across the lawn. The air smells of fresh-cut grass and honeysuckle. It is the smell of peace. I am sitting on the front porch in my favorite rocking chair. The wood beneath me is solid. No creaks, no rot. I inspected it myself. Out on the lawn, Dante is riding the big zero-turn mower. He isn't just the lawn guy anymore. He is the property manager. He runs a crew of 3 guys now. I helped him set up his LLC. I co-signed on his first truck. He is part of the foundation now, and sitting next to me on the porch swing is Layla. She is still thin. Her cheekbones are a little sharper than they used to be, and there are streaks of gray in her hair that weren't there a year ago. She moves a little slower. She still has nightmares sometimes, but her eyes are clear. The fog is gone. The fear is gone. She is holding a glass of iced tea watching Dante work. She takes a sip and smiles at me. "It looks good, Dad," she says softly. "The garden. It finally looks like Mom's garden again." "It does, baby," I say. "It does." She reaches out and takes my hand. Her grip is strong. The tremors are gone. "Thank you," she whispers. "For what?" "For not listening to me. For breaking down the wall. For bringing the sledgehammer." I squeeze her hand. "I am a builder, Layla. I don't like walls that shouldn't be there." We sit in silence for a while, just listening to the hum of the mower and the chirping of the crickets. It is a good silence. It is not the heavy, suffocating silence of secrets. It is the silence of a day's work done well. I think about Patrick O'Connell sometimes. Not often. Just enough to remind myself that justice is real. He is in a cell in Nevada now, waiting for his appeals to run out. He sends letters sometimes. Begging. Threatening. Bargaining. I burn them. I don't even open them. The ash makes good fertilizer for the roses. He thought he could steal this. He thought he could walk into my life with a fake smile and a forged signature and take what took me 40 years to build. He thought because I was old, I was weak. He thought because I was kind, I was stupid. He didn't understand the difference between a house and a home. A house is just an asset. It can be bought and sold. It can be stolen. But a home is a fortress. It is built on loyalty. It is reinforced with truth. And it is defended by the kind of love that will tear the world apart to save its own. I look at Layla. She is laughing at something Dante yelled over the roar of the engine. She looks happy. She looks safe. The inspection is complete. The structure is sound. The foundation held. And as I rock back and forth watching the sun dip below the horizon, I close my eyes and I finally let myself rest. We often think that monsters hide under the bed, but sometimes they sleep in it. I spent my life building strong foundations for houses, forgetting that the most dangerous termites aren't insects. They are people with charming smiles and greedy hearts. I learned that protecting your family isn't just about being a provider, it is about being a guardian. Trust is precious, but verification is survival. Never hand over the keys to your kingdom until you are sure the person asking for them intends to maintain the castle, not sell the bricks. A father's job doesn't end at retirement. It ends when he takes his last breath. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps me share more stories like this one. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to protect your family from someone they trusted? I read every single comment. Until next time, stay safe and check your foundations.